quorum. We had a great time. And now kids go back to school Monday.
Oh, yes, everything's short. You're looking good, man. You're looking good.
Good morning, everybody. We are going to call to order the Indian River Lagoon Council Board of Directors right now and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you will join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will do a brief introduction of our board. Mr. Lober, would you like to start?
Certainly. I'm Brian Lober. I'm County Commissioner and Vice Chair of the Brevard County Commission.
Hi, Tim Zork, County Commissioner, District 3, Indian River.
Aaron Watkins, Director, Central District Department of Environmental Protection.
Good morning, I'm Stacy Hetherington, Commissioner for District 2, Martin County.
Deb Denny's, Volusia County Council.
TGIF, Doug Bornick, St. John's Water Management District.
I'm Libby Pigman. I'm with South Florida Water Management District, and I'm here on behalf of Governing Board Member Jackie Thurlow-Lippish.
Okay.
Chris Zadowski, St. Lucie County Commissioner.
Very good. Good morning. Okay. Any agenda revisions?
None from staff.
Kathy or Dwayne, none from staff. Council, is there anything you would like changed or added? Okay. We will move on to resolutions, recognition letters, and awards. And I think Mr. Zapata, our Deputy Director of Water Protection Division, acting as our acting chief of, this is a lot of words, Cesar, acting Chief Air Enforcement Branch, United States Environmental Protection Agency, Region 4, has a presentation for us. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Board. It is with great pleasure that I sit here today in front of you to give you great news to the Indian River National Estuary Program. On July 23rd, 2019, the Environmental Protection Agency informed the Indian River Lagoon NEP that their Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan, and from now on I'm going to say CCMP because there's a lot of words there, is consistent with EPA's guidance and is considered as final document by the agency. I have the letter here in my hands and I want to read them to you, and I'll give you a copy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And the letter reads as follows. The EPA has assessed the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program 2018 Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan, looking ahead to 2030, a 10-year CCMP for the Indian River Lagoon, Florida. The EPA has verified that the 2018 CCMP is consistent with the CCMP revision and update guidelines and NEP funding guidance. Therefore, the Indian River Lagoon NEP 2018 CCMP is officially considered final by EPA.
Thank you.
The EPA is looking forward to receiving monitoring plan, finance plan, habitat restoration plan, and community outreach strategy that are expected to be completed within the next 3 years to complement the 2018 CCMP. In addition, EPA is looking forward to receiving the next Indian River Lagoon NEP CCMP update in 2025 and another full revision in 2030. I won't be here, but still looking forward to it.
You just might be.
The EPA would like to recognize the Indian River Lagoon NEP, the entire management conference, for its tireless effort in developing the model CCMP. I would like to specifically thank you for your staff, Kathleen Hill, for your extensive public participation and engagement process that provided ample opportunity for speaking events, written comments, and responses on multiple CCMP drafts. The EPA is eager to learn how each citizen, scientist, local, community, public agency, and stakeholder who has been called to action by the 2018 CCMP will contribute to the restoration, stewardship, and ultimate health of the Indian River Lagoon. On behalf of EPA headquarters, Region 4, congratulations on a job well done.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
letter is signed by our Water Division Director in Region 4, Janine M. Ghetto, which hopefully I'm trying to get her here for our November meeting, so you'll get to meet her and get her also in the Indian River Lagoon so she can see the projects and the progress that we've been making in the last few years. I also want to, on my personal side, I want to congratulate Dr. DeFries for his leadership and tireless efforts to make the CCMP document a reality. And to Kathy Hill for her, she's tireless efforts in trying to do outreach and organizational of putting everything together. 4 years ago, when I started my current position in the EPA, I was asked to be the senior management advisor for this NEP program and represent the EPA on the board. At that time, there was going a transition between St. John's and creating the new board here, and the one that we have here today. And I watched as the board has matured very, very quickly as far as through outstanding leadership from everybody who has brought up to get to where we are today. This has been true because of the leadership of Dr. DeFries, the board directors from all the different commissioners who have been chairs, including Ed Fielding, Kurt Smith, Chris Davosky, and now Deb Dennis, who is leading this organization, the board. It has matured, learned about the NEP to the point that we're being very successful implementing projects. I am proud to serve as a member of this organization, and I have seen the firsthand commitment of everybody who serves in this board and in each of the committees. Your work demonstrates my belief that the National Estuary Program is the premier watershed restoration program. And the reason why I say that is because it's the local stakeholders, you guys who define where the problems are. You also put your work, and there are partnerships, local, state, federal partnerships that make this happen. And the investments are made by everybody who has a stake in this issue. So to me, it's like a premier watershed program where local control and the help from everybody else help improve the water quality. And our logo sums all that, one lagoon, one community, and one voice. Again, thank you very much for a good job for everybody and the board for their leadership, and big applause for everybody.
Wow, there's a lot of heavy lifting been going on, a lot of long hours. I want to thank everybody that's been involved with this, the board, and the management conference, and staff. This was a heavy lift.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it was quality. This is really a very quality document, and thank you to the EPA, especially to you, Cesar, and Jennifer DeMeo, Region 4, and Vince Bacalon at EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Council, at this time, I think it would be prudent if we made a motion to move the CCMP to closure and remind us that we have adopted the final draft in December of 2018. So we've already done the final draft, approved that, right?
That's
Dwayne?
correct.
So we can accept a motion to adopt the IRL NEP Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, our CCMP, looking ahead to 2030. Should that be to the desire of the council?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Lober, seconded by?
Tim Zork.
Thank you. Okay. Any opposition to the motion? I dare you.
I'll take you out.
Yeah, and Chris has got our back.
Yeah.
We're in. Seeing that, the motion passes unanimously. And with that, we can, yes, sir?
Gotta have a sense of
Did I say comment?
Oh, yes. I have a comment. Just adding to this section of the resolutions, I wanted to, our Board of Martin County Commissioners met on June 30th, and I wanted to thank Dr. DeFries for coming down and presenting to our board and giving them an update on the CCMP. And I just wanted to share with the council that our board adopted unanimously this resolution, a resolution of the board Board of County Commissioners of Martin County, Florida, supporting adoption of the Indian River Lagoon Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, agreeing to work as an active partner to achieve the vision, mission, promise, and goals of the Indian River Lagoon Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan. So our board was just pleased to get an update and acknowledges all of, like you said, it was a heavy lift, all of the hard work. And I'm new to the board and to this council, but I will say that it's one of the most impressive organizations with the most impressive leadership that I've had the pleasure to sit on. So our board and Martin County was proud to present this resolution, and we'll provide a copy of the original for that for you to include in the CCMP. Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments on this?
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just a point of update on the resolutions. You know, I've been working with Commissioner Lober to get scheduled in Brevard. Okay. We are scheduled in Indian River County for August 13th. Volusia passed their resolution in February, and so those of you, you know, we're still working with, you know, either a letter, we would like to bind, you know, something from each agency and organization when we actually go to binding of this document. And it's not a rush, but we'd like to get that completed over the next few weeks and move this to a printer so we can finalize once we have signature, which you'll talk about in a minute, I think.
I think we will. Wonderful. Yeah, I think the point made to make sure that you are included in the final document. We still have a window of opportunity here. If you haven't had a resolution passed within your jurisdiction, we certainly don't want to leave you out. So thank you, Dr. DeFries, for including that. So that being said, I think it would be prudent to direct staff to schedule a signing ceremony and work with council members to the remaining letters. We've got that letter of support from our respective agencies. So we can direct staff then to set up a signing ceremony. Can we do that? Council, are you in agreement with that?
Yes.
So we're thinking like chocolate, champagne.
Now you're talking. I'll bring the chocolate, I'll bring the champagne. What we'll do is we'll make sure we get all the documents, so I'll work with you individually. Then we'll set up a date and work with each of you. Okay. I think it's important, since each of you get to sign this document, that we schedule a day where all of you can be there, you know, for that event. And while we're not rushing, it'd be great to get that done between now and, I would say, you know, the November timeframe. And so we'll work with you all to try to work that schedule and keep you informed.
There's another heavy lift getting us all together and signing a vote you're all up for. Thank you so much. Cesar, it's always a pleasure working with you, and look forward to the future. Any other comments, council members?
One more, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just want for the record to let everybody know that while we have adopted this final CCMP, we are not taking it off the website. So, you know, we are currently in that final draft format. You know, we're going to leave that up until we have everything executed in that document. Then that document's going to go on our website, and we are going to leave it up for continual public comment. Because we don't want this to be a document that sits on a shelf. And so while we don't come back to the EPA for 5 years for update, we may very well be coming to you as council, you know, as issues or emergencies arise where we need to tweak this plan. So we want this to be a living document, and you know, it now is an important piece of, you know, our history. And I also want to urge you, we mentioned this in both the management conference, the CAC, and the STEM AC, for those of you who write grants, whether you're listening on TV, you know, whether you're a municipality, a nonprofit, any grant that you write, especially if it's a federal grant, should be referencing this document, because it is a document that empowers this restoration effort. And it can help you in your review process, the funding process. You know, we have an official federal guidance now for management, and everybody should be referencing this if they're looking for money for projects.
I hope everybody wrote that down. If not, that's going to go number 1 on my list for a meeting next week. Thank you so much, Dr. DeFries. Cesar, any other comments, sir?
No, that's it. I appreciate, again, your time and all the efforts and leadership throughout this process. You've been very open, and which has been very good, I mean, with the public getting a lot of comments, and also very, as we worked through all that, they were able to make changes and get it where we needed to be. So very impressed with the final product, and I'm very proud of the work done.
Thank you. Look forward to the successes in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment. Are there any elected officials or staff in the audience at this time that would like to introduce yourself and say hello? Yes, sir.
If it's all right, I've asked Admiral Justice to come out. He's the chair of the Port Canaveral Port Commission.
Certainly. I was going to call him in just a minute, but yes, if you'd like to, yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Thanks, and I'll cede the floor to him, but he has a few comments that he'd like to share with us. This morning, he's a retired 2-star admiral and former carrier of the nuclear football.
Wow.
So,
I did that. Low stress.
Well, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, yes. Wayne Justice, Coast Guard retired, and I'm here, Canaveral Port Commissioner. I wanted to make and appreciate the opportunity to make a comment. Our Port Authority is committed to the environmental stewardship and concern for the Indian River Lagoon. As a governmental body with public responsibility, the Canaveral Port Authority has been and continues to be committed to protecting the environment in which we live and work, ensuring our resources are in harmony with Port Canaveral's economic growth. We will maintain the highest level of environmental responsibility to the region. I think that's obvious. Just real quick, our business model is pretty simple there. We make a lot of money, and we reinvest it in the infrastructure of the port, which grows jobs, which makes more money that we reinvest into the infrastructure of the port, and it's a wonderful cycle. And we've had the opportunity to doubled our revenues in the last 7 years, so well over $100 million. It's a great thing. So I think things are well there. Our cruise, cargo, and recreational business rely on the port's commitment to helping our habitat while we preserve our port. This last year, we've calculated that we've delivered over $1.4 million to the Save Our Lagoon Fund through our half-cent sales tax paid through Brevard County. And so proud to be here, proud to talk about this. We've got a great relationship. We've got a studies money being spent, Mr. Freeze is going to talk about that with us later this year. And thank you for the time. I also want to shift gears real quick because I see some, I think there's some Brevard Zoo people here. I'm not sure why they're here, but I can tell you that we are intimately involved at the port. There's an aquarium project that Brevard Zoo is working on, and it's on our property, and we've got 10 acres ready to go with it's going to be not just an aquarium, but it's going to be a research center and also an educational piece. And so we're looking forward to moving that project forward. Thank you very much. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. Thank you, Commissioner Lober.
Thank you all.
Any other public comments or anybody wishing to speak to the council at this time?
Madam Chair, I'm going to put one of my staff members on the spot. Mike Middlebrook just got in here, and he's been working hard on one of the grants that was provided by the NEP, and he's like, what do I want to do now? You're going to come up here, and you're going to give him a quick brief overview. And they've been working very hard, and the island has really coming around, and not only is the county commission proud of what is happening at Wesley's Island, it's what's happening around the island that makes it even that much better from our environment for the lagoon's standpoint. And Mike, I don't usually put you on the spot, but you've been working hard out there, and I'd like to have a presentation later on after we get all the pictures and video and all that done. But just briefly, could you give the council an update of what we've been doing and all of your work?
Sure. Madam Chair, members of the board, Mike Middlebrook, St. Lucie County Natural Resources Manager, for the record. A few years ago, NEP helped fund Wesley's Island, kind of a kickoff for an invasive species project and restoration project on the island. It's in the Port of Fort Pierce. It's about 4-acre restoration area on a 9 to 10-acre island right in the middle of the port. So it faces out the inlet right there. And we've been working years on this now, and you all helped kind of were the seed money and to getting that project off the ground, helped clear the Australian pines and Brazilian pepper trees off the island. And then we came in and planted, the county did, with $17,000 worth of plants, native species, partnering with the state and the IRL aquatic preserve folks. And it's been a great project. The community's come out and support big time with all the planting projects, and it's several years running now. And we just got the Indian River Lagoon license plate grant this year. It was an NEP-funded project this phase, but it's definitely a continuation of the money that we received years ago. So it's been fantastic. We brought out at least 60 cabbage palms to the island this last week. Had to take it out on barges. I mean, they're 10-foot or taller trees lining the shoreline. We brought out some picnic tables. We're starting to get the educational infrastructure out there, and one of the goals of the island, since it's in such close proximity to the area, the museum point there and all the parks, and it's right in the viewshed of Fort Pierce, is to make an educational island for the Indian River Lagoon. So we actually built a small outdoor classroom setting out there with some benches and a place for sea camps to come out there in the summer. And we've been partnering with the Stella Maris group every summer since they've started doing trips out there in the summertime and bringing kids out there, especially underprivileged kids, to the island to learn about the lagoon and kind of get the citizen science engagement going on out there at the island. So it's been a fantastic project. It's just another phase. This is really phase 2 or 3, and we hope to continue, but we could certainly bring an update if so pleases the group, and we'll bring some photos and all that, but definitely a great volunteer-led project. I appreciate it, Commissioner, bringing that to light. So.
How's that bus? And if I could add too, I'd like to recognize MMPS Environmental, who adopted the island several years ago, Jim Oppenborn, who's been part of that conversation, and the hundreds of volunteers that have been part of that process. It is an exciting time, and it's how we partner, and that's what this group has been about, is partnerships and bringing small bits of funding together to make a great project happen. So I just wanted to share that with you, and Mike didn't know he was going to share it today, so I apologize.
That's okay. I appreciate it. Put me on the spot. Keep me on my toes. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Commissioner. You know, so we fund these projects. It's kind of nice to get an update on what's going on with these local projects, and maybe we need to highlight those a little bit more. Maybe, especially as we grow and we're funding all these great projects with really strong outcomes. So thank you for sharing that, and we celebrate your success. And okay, anybody else that would like to share anything, another success, or speak to the council before we get into the business of the day? Okay, seeing none. Let's go to our audit report, the 2018 independent audit report. I'll turn that over to you, Dr. DeFries.
Madam Chair, it's a pleasure. We're on item number 6, presentation of the fiscal year 2018 independent audit report. Each year, we work with Special District Services, and I want to recognize Michael McGillicott, who's here and behind me. They do our financials, and then we have James Moore and Company do the audit, and so we have James Halloran here, who will present the audit report and findings. So, James, welcome.
All right, thank you, Dwayne. James Halloran with James Moore and Company. Work up and live up in Volusia County. So a little bit about your audit report. You guys have been around 3 years, so this will be the third audit you've had. So inside that audit report, you'll see a number of reports with James Moore & Company's letterhead on it. You guys are audited under U.S. auditing standards, government auditing standards, and then the Florida Auditor General also has requirements that we're required to report on as well. You are not subject yet to Federal Single Audit Act. That would be if you had greater than $750,000 of federal funds. So maybe couple of years, maybe next year, you get to that point where you get a little more federal funding, you'll be subject to that as well. So a little bit about the audit for this year. The first part is the opinion on the financial statements. Our opinion on the financial statement is what's considered an unmodified opinion, which I know does not sound glorious at all, but that is the best opinion we can give as independent certified public accountants. States that the financial statements present fairly in all material specs. Your financial position results of operations for the year ended September 30th, 2018. So congratulations, Dwayne and Michael. Internal control and compliance report. This is required under government auditing standards and requires us to look at controls over financial reporting as well as material compliance requirements. In that, what we noticed for the year is we had two large material adjustments that were required to the financial statements. In auditor language, a material weakness would be the most severe comment we could give, then a significant deficiency, and then just purely recommendations and suggestions. Material weakness is something that we believe would materially misstate the financial statements and not be caught in a timely manner by the current processes in place. The first one related to a grant agreement. So there was a grant expenditure that incurred, and expenses were incurred prior to September 30th, but those expenses were not recorded on the books, on the accounting records. And with that, that meant that the expenses weren't recorded in the offsetting payable out to the vendor, and then as well as the grant revenue wasn't recorded or the receivable back from that because it was a grant. The second item related to member contributions, which all of you up here contribute as part of those member contributions. And when we initially looked at the financial records, the revenue side was $662,449,000 low compared to what it should be. When we dug into that, we realized the revenue was still sitting not as revenue, but the cash was collected, but it had never been recognized as revenue. It was still sitting as a liability on your balance sheet as unearned revenue. So we proposed an adjustment to increase the member contributions, which typically for you guys will always equal your budget. You haven't had a case where you haven't had a member contribute for a year. So in that case, we increased the revenue up by that almost $662,000. The Auditor General also required us to look at a number of things. We looked at all the items the Auditor General required, and we had no items that required any findings or notation in our audit report. We are also required by the Auditor General to look specifically at the Florida investment statute and issue a separate report on that as well. And you guys are in compliance with those specified investment statutes. There were no prior audit findings, either in the government auditing standards report or in the Auditor General report, so there's no follow-up for any prior audit findings this year. I always get asked about the overall financial health. This is part of the Auditor General's analysis that we do as part of the Auditor General report. And what we do is we compare an entity over a 5-year period. Of course, with you guys, that's not possible. Right now, it's only a 3-year period. And then we also compare it to benchmarks. The Auditor General provides benchmarking. And so some of the special districts we compare you to is the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, the Sarasota, Millers Creek, and the Everglades Protection Area. So those 5, you guys are in this group that we're benchmarking against, as well as looking at your overall history over the past 3 years. And what's kind of interesting about you guys is, you know, your first couple years, you're just now kind of hitting your stride a little bit. So it's not surprising. You have some areas where you've collected some cash in those earlier years, and now you're starting to spend down that cash that you have from those member contributions. It takes a little while to get the programs going and make sure you have the right projects, make sure they're well organized so you can, you know, have those monies working in the communities. The overall condition assessment was inconclusive, which is average. And you had 2 favorable criteria, 5 unfavorable, and 7 inconclusive. So some numbers for the year, some changes, you know. General fund balance just slightly down for the year, only $34,000. Your member contribution stayed the same, $1.5 million for the year. Your federal grants increased $140,000. You're at about almost $550,000 in federal grant funds at the end of the year. You had a slight decrease in your specialty license plate revenue, just $3,000. You're right about $130,000 in revenues coming in from the specialty license plate. But you expended some more of that money this year, so you expended about $171,000. So you have restricted funds related to that license plate money. You can only use it for the specified purpose, about $239,000 at year end. Your total expenses increased by $736,000. This is kind of what I mentioned before, the financial condition assessment. As you guys collect those monies, you're able to match it with other programs, match it with your federal grant dollars, and then get those working in the community. So a little bit about the general fund and kind of looking at the magnitude of what you have left over at the end of the year. About $1.3 million is what you had left over at the end of the year. So that excludes out the restricted money from the specialty license plates. If you look at that in comparison to your total expenses, whether it's budgeted or your actual for the year, about $2.2 million, so you're about 60%. So a little bit, just about 7 months worth of expenditure sitting there at the end of the year. Going forward, as each year, you guys might want to consider looking at a fund balance policy to determine, what level do you want to keep, what minimum is works for you guys. One, matching both when you have to, as you have federal funds, as you lay out the cash first and then you wait to get reimbursed. So those are some of the factors you'd want to consider in establishing that policy. At a minimum, the Government Finance Officers Association always suggests at least 2 months. So that's about 17%. But each entity is a little bit different depending on cash flow and other needs you guys may have. Some note disclosures just to kind of point out for the year. A new one for the year is related to other post-employment benefits. You guys went in partnership with Brevard County, has a health insurance program that allows other governments to kind of tag onto them, so they're able to provide staff a better insurance than they would on their own. Also then with that required some disclosure related to the other post-employment benefits side. You're also members of the state retirement system, the FRS system. So with that, you record your percentage net pension liability for the entire system of the state of Florida. So at year end, that's about $346,000. Coming forward in accounting pronouncements, the only thing out there that potentially would affect you right now, you don't have any real significant leases, but if you did have any leases, that'll change how they're recorded on the financial statements going forward. That is all I have, but I'll take any questions or comments you may have.
Council, any comments, questions?
Just one comment. It's a very good report, and it's amazing that our staff has done this with the significant staff changes and with our quarterback having been taken out with a knee injury for a while. So they've done a great job. Kudos to this staff for this report. Thank you very much.
Great comment. And the bottom line is it's a clean audit, right? It's a clean audit. Can't get any better than that. Anything else? Thank you for bringing that forward. That's really true.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I just want to thank Brevard County. Our move to combine with their services for healthcare was a significant benefit to staff. It was a great decision that you all made, but that partnership has been valuable. And for somebody who has just incurred an awful lot of medical expenses, I can't imagine where I would be right now under our original situation compared to where I am now. So I just want to extend a thank you to Brevard, for the opportunity to partner. We made a very good decision there, both financially, but also for the staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Council will accept a motion to accept the FY 2017-18 Independent Audit Report.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have that, Kathy? Okay. Any opposition to the motion? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. We'll see you next year.
See you around town.
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I make just a brief comment on the health insurance?
Certainly.
Just as a heads up, Dr. DeFries, I know that we're in the process of coming into rebidding for that. So whereas we have Cigna and I think Health First is the second option now, I know that they're going through the process of putting together the docs to get that rebid. But I can assure you I've got good folks that are working on it at the county side. So it's going to be at least as good as what we have now when that process ends up going through.
And everybody I've talked to, when we did that first analysis, all of the counties are working really hard to keep costs down. Brevard County's staff has done an exceptional job of finding the best care. And because it's a big county, they've got some leverage in the negotiation strategy. So kudos to your whole team. You've really done a great job of keeping costs low to the taxpayer, but also making sure, your employees are well covered.
Yeah, we definitely have a good number of people. Aside from the 4 digits that we employ directly, even some of the constitutional offices make use of that same coverage. The clerk's office is one example. They have a number of branch locations and several hundred employees, so it's something where you're spot on. We do have a degree of leverage on account of the number of insured that we have. Thank you all.
You're welcome, Council. Okay, how about some management conference committee reports? We will start with management board report. Good morning, Mr. Chair. How are you?
Hi, folks.
Good morning.
Happy Friday. The management board met on Tuesday at Up the Creek. I'm going to go through briefly. I'm going to reference your packet you have in front of you so we can try to optimize our time here. Unfortunately, there was no quorum for the Finance Committee, so there was no true Finance Committee activity. We did, however, review our previous discussions regarding restructuring of some of the reports. You've heard me in the 3 years I've been chair always talk about the great membership. Our membership has been further distinguished by Jim Sullivan is now on the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, and the infamous Chuck Jacoby and Dwayne DeFries have now been appointed to the Governor's Red Tide Task Force. So our membership is truly an exceptional group of people. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that Tony Cantonese also wrote a book that's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and he was willing to sign it. Diane and Chuck will give you the water quality reports that we heard. They were presented and accepted. We had a very interesting interactive presentation by a gentleman named Dr. Randy Parkinson, which dealt with the second phase of the APA supplemental grant. Phase 1 dealt with identification of vulnerability, and phase 2 is what they're doing now, is about the action plan. And the 3 primary climate change stressors were identified as storms, sea level, and rainfall. That was an informational presentation that, based on our discussions, will be coming forward to us again and to this council at some future date. As stated previously by Cesar, our big moment there was Jennifer DeMeo, sits on the management board, and she talked about our acceptance of their acceptance of the CCBMP, which was, in my opinion, a great moment in our short history. And you think that we're not quite 5 years old, we've done a hell of a lot. It's a model CCEMP revision, and as Dwayne said, it gives us a codified direction for all stakeholders in our community to work. So we emphasize repeatedly at the meeting that this document is the anchor that gets you into matters relative to project development, okay? So any municipality, advocacy group, or what have you that wants to proceed forward truly has a great document for which they can reference. Specific to your agenda today, under 10B, I, and III, we had unanimous motions to approve the amended budget amendment under I, and the budget amendment under II, and the reallocation under III. I wish they would use 1, 2, and 3 so I don't have to say I. There was some discussion. There was a notation, I'm sure it's in your packet, of a $50,000 decrease in salaries due to the departure of my dear friend B. Frank. And there was some discussion that perhaps some of that money, and it's purely your discretion, may be used to go into salaries. I know you're going to have a discussion later about matters relative to salaries, and it's always been my charge in businesses I've been associated with. Our job is to attract and retain quality, and I think you have that here. And as Doug says, we don't want to lose our starting quarterback or our defensive line we don't want to lose our team. And we picked up a good one in Daniel, so I'm happy with where we're at there. That was just a plug there. The business plan, so we've dealt all those matters. So in regards to old business DB, as in Bob, those were all taken care of. Relative to new business, in section L, on your microalgae, HAB, your atmospheric deposition, and your species biodiversity RFQs, RFPs, the matters were all put out and again approved. There was some question in regards to the microalgae and HAB and the atmospheric deposition. There was only one respondee, but those respondees, or that respondee in each one of those cases, was rated exceptionally high in the 98th percentile bracket. So, and then in regards to species biodiversity, the two applicants, UF and FAU, will split that as in the past. So the management board was very satisfied with what happened there. We did talk about the modification of the RFP process. There was talk about addressing social sciences and recurring costs. The detailed discussion got into, in your section 11D, the legislative process. We went over the talking paper for both the federal and state, had much discussion about it. And we've been discussing about this for years. Still try to hold to the fact that we do not want to be or are not encouraged to be a regulatory agency. But as you all know, the management board is simply an advisory group to you, that you are the policymakers and you are the directors. So we try to avoid that. We don't discourage advocacy. We tell advocates to be advocates, but we try to keep Dwayne out of the weeds, and we try to not put him in a corner or paint him in a corner with too myopic a viewpoint of what's happening in the lagoon. So we feel that he's a better quarterback if he has flexibility to call option plays and not be given the playbook. Okay? So that's been something we've talked about since this council was formed. And again, that is your discretion. The last bit of business that I didn't, at the request of Dwayne, Kathy, and Daniel put together a return on investment, which I found is a great document. I don't know if it's still in draft form, but it's a good go-to sheet to see where the money's been, where it's been distributed, and the efforts that we try to be an agency or a group that tries to do what's in the best interest of the community, but in a very fiscal, conservative mindset with utmost respect for our fiduciary responsibilities to be good custodians, not only of the lagoon, but representatives of the people. That's it.
It's a pretty good report, very thorough.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. DeFries, are you going to be discussing the NEP partner funding report, or is this a time to discuss this?
Yeah, we'll be discussing that as we move through some of the budget issues.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your tireless effort.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, and Dr. Jacoby, welcome. Our STEM Advisory Chair.
Indeed. So we were likewise happy to recommend that you accept the final CCMP, which, as everyone has said, was a heavy lift for lots of folks, including some on the STEM AC. We also then talked about, well, you know, a lot of what we're doing now for the lagoon is kind of looking backward and fixing issues that developed over time. Right. And one of the things that we want to do with the STEM AC in particular is to look forward and say, can we see issues on the horizon that we might be better prepared for if we give it some thought now? Or as I like to think about it, yeah, feed, clothe, and house the kids today, but you also have to invest something in their college education if you want it when you get there. And so we'll be doing that with this Science 2030 document, which we began, but which got set aside as we tried to force our way through the CCMP. The other thing that the STEM AC will engage in is to work as closely as possible with the contractors who, in essence, are developing the baseline for a lot of things around the lagoon. So, you know, these are the contracts that for the lagoon technical report, the habitat restoration plan, the monitoring plan, and the asset mapping. And so we'll be getting quarterly reports at our meetings and trying to work with those contractors to make sure that all those plans come together and give you a solid baseline to move forward. It's kind of going back to some of the things that were done in the past, but it's revisiting these sort of baselines, say, where are we now? We recommended that the various projects, the two contractors for the microalgae and HAB monitoring, that's UF and FAU, the atmospheric deposition and the species biodiversity, that those move forward. The respondents, although limited, were high quality and probably the best you can find. We accepted the priorities for next year's RFPs, although there was this discussion which trickled over into the management board about social science and is that represented as completely as possible. So again, if you're doing outreach of various types, are we able to see the difference that we're making? Can we track that? Can we adapt what we're doing? And so I'm sure that'll be a topic in the future. There was an EPA supplemental grant that was received, which is going to put forward to use to continue that focus on harmful algal blooms in the Indian River Lagoon. So this is kind of a morphing of the algal blooms investigation that the district funded back in 2012-13. And so we'll carry that on. And we also recognize that we'll have to collaborate and cooperate with all the various other task forces that are being formed as we go forward. The Blue-Green Algal Task Force, the Red Tide Task Force, UF is going to have a Harmful Algal Blooms Task Force. I'm sure there'll be more. So we'll try to keep all that moving in as straight a line as possible. And last but not least, we gave up our coffee and bagel slot to the management board, so we'll be meeting in the afternoons from now on.
You lost the flip of the coin, eh?
Had to happen sooner or later. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, council comments? Seeing none, thank you again, Dr. Jacoby, for your presence and your tireless work. Frank Catino, is Frank here, who's on the Citizen Advisory Committee?
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and take that. Captain Frank is on the water, I believe, with a charter. We spent quite a lot of time in the Citizen Advisory Committee, not just working through this agenda, but a lot of discussion on the need for better communication, dealing with information problems. There's a lot of misinformation and people just don't understand the complexity of some of these issues. We'll actually be addressing some of that with some of the additional budget items. CSA also unanimously supported the adoption of the CCMP. And they actually gave us, or maybe I gave us, and then I gave it to Kathy, a work order. They would very much like to see more information coming out of the NEP on a more regular basis. And so what we promised is that we would deliver a quarterly update on progress. Each of you get a very kind of clinical, almost tactical quarterly update from me in every meeting. But that has never been kind of user-friendly. It's just a series of bullets of, how we're going about the business of the last 90 days. And so when I volunteered that I would do a newsletter, Kathy immediately said, "You're not doing the newsletter, I'm doing the newsletter." And so by November, you will see us with our first newsletter, and we will continue that information outreach. And one of the things the CAC does is that they oversee the small grants program. They're very anxious to get that moving again. And so a little later in the meeting, we'll show you what the calendar looks like for RFPs. Thank you.
Very good. And Dr. Jacoby, I believe you're back up again for water quality.
So in the St. Johns River Water Management District portion of the lagoon, temperatures have been in the sort of mid-80s to low 90s, but they're falling with the rainfall as you get this influx of fresh water, so temperatures are dropping a bit. Salinities were somewhat high in Mosquito Lagoon, about 30. That's a little bit high for the estuary. But they were sort of in the mid-20s, and again, they're dropping as the fresh water comes into the system. So in terms of converting that to a specific gravity, we're kind of looking at about 1.014, give or take. If you kind of take the average temperature, it is about 92 degrees Fahrenheit, and the salinity about 25. But again, that'll be dropping off as the fresh water hits. The good news, I guess, is that chlorophyll levels are pretty low most places, down below 20 and sometimes even below 10 in most places. The only exception to that are the pyridinium blooms that are taking place around Titusville and potentially north and a few other places. Pyridinium is that dinoflagellate, gives you the bioluminescence that the kayakers love. It's a thing that bloomed in the lagoon, has bloomed in the lagoon for a long time. It's probably one of the better players in terms of not building up these massive blooms that last a long time. It does move around, it can swim, and so it does migrate up and down, and it's patchy. So, you'll see a spot and then it'll be gone. But that also means that the dissolved oxygen levels have been good, above 2 certainly, and mostly above 4 milligrams per liter. And 2 is that limit where the aquatic life starts to struggle. So we're doing well. And perhaps the best news is the seagrass transects for summer have found some recovery. And it's sporadic, but it runs from sort of up north around Hallover, down through, and even down reaching to Fort Pierce. So in places, we're seeing Halopolo, which is one of the main species that we see. But another thing that's out there that may confuse people is macroalgae, Caulerpa. And it has a kind of a rhizome as well, and it's anchored to the bottom. And there's a fair bit of that around. But in several places in past reports in the literature, this is viewed as a precursor to seagrass recovery because it shows the water quality is improving, the clarity is improving, so sunlight's reaching the bottom, and also this anchors the sediments. So one of the struggles for seagrass is when you lose large amounts of it is the sediment moves around now a lot more than it did. And so we're hopeful that this is leading us back to some recovery if conditions can stay as they are. Happy to answer any questions.
Where in the water column is the salinity taken from? Mid or top?
Top. We don't see necessarily most places a lot of stratification. Probably right at the mouths of, say, Sebastian River or something like that, you might see some, but generally speaking, there's nothing in the water column.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you as well for giving me the specific gravity numbers. It's a lot easier for me than learning a new language with salinity.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank John Windsor. He was the one that brought all that together rapidly.
Thank you.
Yes, one other question. Do you see a difference in the stormwater as it relates to temperature? So if you take, say, City of Vero Beach, it's probably 75% impervious area, all drains from the US 1 corridor. US 1 corridor drains right into the lagoon. So during the daytime when you have that water flow, I would guess it's got to be 10 degrees hotter than stormwater runoff coming from grassy surfaces. Does that temperature difference make any change? I guess if you get too much hot water over time, maybe it's getting diluted out with the cooler rainwater.
Yes, I think that's probably true, is, the quantity of rainwater that's warmer than the lagoon is probably less than the quantity that's cooler. And again, a lot of our sampling is spot sampling. So, we're not tracking right at inflows on a regular basis, on a 15-minute basis or something like that. So, you're seeing this blending. So what we see are the large-scale changes.
Right, okay, thank you.
Anything else, Council? Thank you, Dr. Jacoby. And Diana Hughes, Martin County.
Good morning. Diane Hughes, Martin County Ecosystem Restoration and Management Division. Give you a little update of what's going on down south. As you can see, the lake is at 12.07. That was as of yesterday. I didn't check it yet this morning. And it's been going up pretty steadily in the past 2 weeks with the local rains that we've had going on. You can see there's a lot of water coming into the lake, over 5,000 CFS, and they're not releasing anything right now from the lake. In this slide here, you can see that where all the flows are coming in from the Kissimmee River, from Fish Eating Creek, from Istapoga, and everything. And then you can see there's this negative number over at the C10A. It's circled with the yellow, with the red circle. The negative number means that water's flowing back into the lake, and agriculture and water supply folks are pretty happy that that's happening right now, and we're glad that we're not having any local basin runoff from the C44. You can see here, this is a lake management ban. We had been in the water shortage management ban for some time, and just this week we came back out and into the beneficial use sub-ban. So we're tracking right along the edge of that water shortage management ban, and hopefully we'll stay out of the water shortage management for the next couple of weeks here. You can see here that we've had quite a bit of rain in Martin County in the past 30 days. We're in the 6 to 8 inches of rain that we've had within both the coastal Martin County and the more yellow basin is the C44 basin that we have there. Our mid-estuary salinity is dropping with all the local basin runoff that we've had. Nothing coming from the C44 basin, but we're down at the very end of our preferred salinity range at 12 there, and we like to be between 12 and 20 at the Roosevelt Bridge and the mid-estuary, and with the local basin runoff, we've come down to the lower end of that salinity range. And then here you can see what's happening with the temperatures in the mid-estuary. They're swinging up and down with the rains and runoff that we have coming into the estuary with an average of about 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees Celsius. And we still, with the rains, we are having at one of the four or two of the four river stations, we get some moderate levels of Enterococcus. Earlier in July, we had some poor levels that occurred, but right now we're just tracking with a moderate at Layton Park. And then this is our blue-green algae status on the lake. That was a July 30th picture. And this is just a satellite imagery of where the potential harmful algal bloom might be on the lake. The Army Corps of Engineers has reported blue-green algae to be present at the S308 structure, which is out near the lake, out at Port Mayaca, both on the upstream side and the downstream side of that structure since the end of April. We've had a few days where we've showed, the lock operators have reported blue-green algae on the upstream side of the S80, which is closer into Stewart. It's 27 miles down the road from the S308. When it happened in July, that water did get delivered to us because the canal levels were too high, so they did deliver some C44 basin runoff to us. They had one report earlier this week where they had blue-green algae at the S80 structure, but they're not discharging any of that water. And then the next day, the blue-green algae was not present there anymore. So I believe that's my last slide. So, yep. Oh, I probably went forward, far forward for you. There. Any questions?
Madam Chair? Sure. Just a comment. I boat out of the Stewart Inlet a lot and go to the sandbar, and I go to lunch underneath the Roosevelt Bridge to Sailor's Return, and I got to say that the intercoastal and inlet area and the sandbar area is back to being as beautiful as it's ever been. It's really nice to see that water quality coming back.
I am hearing that from a lot of folks.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That sandbar, when it's incoming tide, it's like being in the Bahamas. It's wonderful.
Oh, good. Great.
Wish I could say it was a disappearing island yesterday under the bridge. I can't say that. But we had a lot of manatee. That was the good news. A lot of manatee, but didn't have that. But thank you for your hard work. Thank you. Looking forward to that coming back for us too. Okay, consent agenda. Approval of the consent agenda. We'll accept a motion unless there's changes.
So moved.
Motion.
Motion for approval.
And a second?
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of the meeting minutes from May 10th, 2019, Board of Directors meeting. We'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Doug, seconded by? Second. Any opposition to the motion? So now we're going to get rid of a pickup truck here, Dwayne?
That was part of consent, but we just wanted to make sure, you were all aware that that truck has no value, that we're meeting all of the state requirements on disposal versus, some auction transfer. If anybody would like to take it, it's out in the parking lot, and we will push it to your home.
I just thought that was worth noting here. It's they're literally pushing this truck around. It's time to.
Possible reef structure.
No.
Okay. We are now on to old business management conference appointments. Kathy.
So we have appointments, new appointments to the management board and a transfer for you. The transfer it's not on your agenda. It was a late request, but it's someone who is already on the citizens committee. They're just going to move over to the management board. So for new appointments, we have Commissioner Ed Fielding, who was nominated by Jackie Thurlow Lippisch. Dave Fuss, who is a land manager in Indian River County. He works for the Indian River Land Trust. Mike Meyer, who is a commissioner in the city of Stewart. Jason Evans is going to replace Clay Henderson as the Stetson University rep on the management board. And then Gary Ritter is the person who's currently on the CAC. He's going to move over to the management board, and he's with the Florida Farm Bureau Foundation.
Good group.
Yep, we think so too. He's much better used there.
Okay, so we want to approve these committee by committee, so we will accept a motion for the new appointments to the management board.
I'll move approval of the new appointments.
Motion and seconded by?
Second.
By Doug. Any opposition to the motions? Welcome aboard. Okay, STEM AC, any?
STEM AC is easy. We have no new appointments there.
And Citizen Advisory Committee.
And on the Citizens Committee, we have 3 new appointments. Becky Harris, nominated by Hetherington in Martin County. And then in Volusia County, we have 2 new ones for Pat Northey and Nancy Maddox.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion seconded by?
Seconded.
Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Can I ask a question, because I heard this, who said this before us? They didn't have a quorum for the Finance Committee. Do we need to talk about this? Because we've heard this before. We having an issue with a quorum, and if we are, what can we do to strengthen that?
Madam Chair, we can see if there are members of management board that want to sit on that subcommittee. When we initially formed that, we kind of anticipated that that finance subcommittee was going to be more advisory to the whole management board, and we cherry-picked, you know, some folks who had really good financial. And in fact, the subcommittee is operating at a very high level. In fact, we have one individual who spent most of his career as an auditor, you know, at the federal level. And so we have kind of formalized them to a higher degree than I think our initial thought was when we first began. So what we'll do as staff is talk to the management board, see if we have members who, you know, with financial background or interest to serve, and some of these individuals that we just moved on board may be, you know, interested in serving on that subcommittee.
Okay, so we're good then? Thank you, sir. All right. We do have time, though, I believe, Council, for a few more appointments to the Citizen Advisory Committee. Yeah, it's an open process, so take a look at your appointments. If we need to add, we can do it at the November meeting, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, budget revision, here we go. And business plan reconciliation, we have 3 items related to the budget, and I'm going to let Dr. DeFries take this, so it's some good work. But before you do that, Dr. DeFries, can I just thank Tommy Self that just walked in representing Senator Scott's office. So Tommy, thank you. Good morning. Yeah, good morning. Thanks for attending.
Madam Chair, before I begin, I want to kind of give a broad view. Normally, we don't, you know, go into the detail that we did this time with you all on some of these, you know, budget amendments. But because we were in the transition of our COO, we took an opportunity to let our new COO do a deep dive, get fully not only aware and familiar with what we've done over the last 5 years, and we'll talk about this later in my report, but we had him dive all the way back to the very beginning of the program. So the 3 items that you will see coming up under 10B are really a budget amendment resolution for our fiscal year 2018-2019, basically to address the audit report and our cash position. You know, once you make the motion for that, then we will amend the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget amendment. And we want to show you a little of the detail because those decisions are going to advise some of our new business decisions when we look at new projects. And then lastly, just reconcile the business plan. And I do at this point want to note, and this is the power of having a management conference. And so we were going through the management board after the financial subcommittee, and one of our members of the management board, Vincent Burke, who's the utility director of Indian River County, actually found a typo in resolution number 2019-06, and it was in a support document. It was one of the numbers. There was a number transferred, and so we will be giving you that amended resolution. It didn't change any of the financials, but if you look on that second page on that support document, we had a number that, was at, I'm looking at it right now, 42,726. That too was a 7. So we've made that change. So I wanted to make sure that you know that in your package, the original package, there was a typo in the support docs for that resolution. And apologize that staff didn't pick it up, but that's why we have this management conference. And I love to see the fact that they're working to that detail. Kathy, you want to put up, we've got so if you look at the detail in front of you, typically we wouldn't show you this, because we go right to the resolution and explain. But I asked Dan to say, because it gets them looking at how we're looking at our business, based on our traditional budget. And so if you look all the way on the right side columns, you can see the higher or lower. So our other expenditures, which is our funding for projects, both encumbered and unencumbered, you see 1.4 million. The 50,000 reduction in salaries was mentioned during the management board. That's actually the difference of that 6 months that our chief operational officer position was vacant. You'll see our total expenditure line, adjusted, and funding balances. So this first agenda item is just to reconcile and amend our fiscal year 2018-19 budget, and this would then be the final budget. And by law, for special districts, we have, Carolyn, it's 60 days, correct? So we have 60 days. So we'll close on September 30. We have 60-day window to make any final amendments by law. So unless something else happens, this will be our final budget to close out pursuant to the audit report and our cash position. So with that, we'll go ahead and entertain, board's discussion or motion.
Board, council, motion, discussion.
Madam Chair, move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a seconded. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
So what we've just done is taken that cash position, and we have to move it forward into the budget about to begin in October, that fiscal year 2019-2020. So I'm going to go through that, and then your next motion will be to amend, that 1920 fiscal year. And so I wanted to show you kind of where the dollars came from. And it was really a useful, action for Dan to kind of see how money's flowing. We'll talk about it in a minute. So our EPA Section 319 funds, and this is important for many of you new board members, and you may have picked this up in our audit report. All of those dollars from the feds are on a reimbursement only issue. And we can only draw from the Treasury. We draw twice a year. So we're very careful about watching our cash flow, and we watch those reimbursables. We are at the end of our 5-year contract period with EPA, which will end on September 30th, and we'll initiate a new contract 5-year period. If in fact, after a grace period, and we're talking to Treasury right now and EPA, if you don't expend those dollars, you don't get them. Right. They disappear back in general revenue in the Treasury, and we don't want to leave, a single cent that we can expend, over on the federal side. And so you will see when we move forward some recommendations on how those dollars should be allocated. So $87,726 is available right now for use in this program, but those dollars will need to be expended, this next fiscal year. Under local cost share funds, in fact, in a couple of our advisory committee meetings, the question was, how did you wind up with that much available? And I wanted to show you where it came from. So we had budgeted small grants early on. Our Citizen Advisory Committee actually hadn't even been formed when we first budgeted. And so getting those RFPs, the whole RFP process, the grants out the door, that all lagged. So we had dollars that didn't get out to active RFP calls. We had held those dollars open the last year or so to see kind of what the absorption rate was. And we have a good feel for what the community response will be. And so that $100,000 is really coming back to shovel-ready turn dirt. That does not mean that we're not doing a small grants program. We will be reissuing $25,000 in small grants this fall, but those dollars that hadn't been used will come back to budget. We have $80,000 budgeted but unused from the grant writing contracts. That is a little concerning to me because we literally give grant writing support to our local communities. And I was talking to Commissioner Lober just yesterday, how do we get that word out to our cities, some of our NGOs that we have that support. And in fact, Commissioner Lober is going to start bringing me around to some of those cities to really start to push that, if we have budgeted money, we'd like to see it used. I may have mentioned this actually we did last meeting, but the big surprise, winner on this so far has been Brevard County. We expended $6,000 in support of a grant writer. That grant writer wrote a proposal for Brevard County that brought in a Stan Mayfield working waterfront grant at over $1.46 million. So not a bad return on investment. And so we want,
And that grant writer's from Volusia County, I'm just saying, the money went to Brevard. So noted. Great job, Brevard. We're watching. That was great. That was great. That's the truth.
We've held for a while now this last phase of the Veterans Memorial Stormwater Retrofit. We had already given grant money for that, and I believe it was phase 4. Phase 2, the reality is they wound up getting enough money where they simply don't need our money. We held it, though, to make sure they didn't. We've confirmed with them that they won't be moving forward, so we bring that $125,000 forward, and there's an agency balance of $51,568. And so this will then make it possible for us to do more work. And so I want to show you that because your motion, will be to amend this budget, but we're also recommending this motion to go ahead and move forward getting those dollars to projects. So we have 3 recommendations from staff. These were all reviewed by our advisory committees and supported. Because of the timeline on the federal dollars, we're going to keep those dollars in the program so we can control expenditures. We're requesting a $25,000 RFQ process, which we'll have to put out quickly. If you remember, about a year ago, we had a contract that brought a data application. We'd like to start using it. So this would bring in a service contract at $25,000 to begin to do that lagoon data management application. We're requesting an additional $42,726 to be added to our communication budget line, which will give us more capacity to do outreach and communication. And pursuant to our discussion last meeting, we're already in conversation with the Brevard County Save Our Indian River Lagoon program. We're talking to the Space Coast Tourism Development because they have $100,000 in communication. I'm going to be reaching out to each of the counties to make sure we're aligned with the needs for communication. And then lastly, our $80,000 RFQ, which you'll see to take the harmful algal bloom groups who are doing our monitoring, we're requesting $20,000 to take that $80,000 budget to 100,000, so we have a little bit more coverage. And once we do the scope of works, there's a little bit of that when we negotiate this. I want to make sure we're prepared if we have a problem, like a bad algal bloom, that we've got a little bit of capacity within those two contractors to increase the intensity of their, their work. So that would be the use of the 87,726 for EPA. And this is the really good news. We always struggle. We have so many great proposals in our RFP process. We never have enough money to go down the list entirely for those fundable projects. So these recommendations do not change the ranking that you saw and passed the last time. We are going straight down the list, until these additional dollars run out. And so for the city of Sebastian, that was only partially funded before. It would be fully funded for septic to sewer. And that was in the restoration RFP. Lost Tree Island in Indian River County, $65,000, also restoration. City of Satellite Beach, $25,816 for Sampson Island. That was in the community-based restoration. $15,000 to Riverside Conservancy for Riverside Restoration Project. That was also community-based. $40,000 to Orca for buffered shoreline work. And then $47,452 to DEP Aquatic Preserves for shoreline restoration. And those are all projects ranked, reviewed. One question I was asked, not in the advisory committees, but after was, how did the relationship happen? And it was about trying to drive as deep into those RFPs as we could where money was available. And so we were hitting some of those really large septic to sewer projects that were just simply not doable. And we were not going to, pursuant to your guidance over the last 2 years, we were going to stick with process, not jump over any project, that when we got to a project, even if it was, too high to fund and we could go down, that we were not going to kind of cherry pick winners or losers. And so I think that has been a good policy directive that we should continue. We had a little bit of money left over, and so we are recommending something we hadn't talked about before. One of our most valuable deliverables has been the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council Economic Study done in 2016. That was several hundred thousands to deliver with multiple funders, including Department of Economic Opportunity. So staff's requesting that we put $25,000 into seed funding to update that plan. We would not move forward unless we received partners with additional funding, but it's always easier to ask for money when you have a little money on the table. I would expect that update is going to go easy over $100,000. But I do think we're in that mode over this year if we can, but definitely next year that we need to update that plan. 2,000 on the very bottom is something that our new COO felt was necessary, that we were a little lean over on the insurance cost side, especially as it relates to liability. We're expecting a small bump up, so we put the appropriate amount that we're expecting into that line item. And the second to the last was important to me. Remember our last meeting, I voiced some concerns about the size of our reserve. So that 82,756 would bring our, contingency reserve up to a little bit more than 5% of our total budget. We don't have much risk exposure, but I don't want to be too lean ever with our program because we can never anticipate crises and emergencies. And so you can see once again, and I won't belabor that, just like the last time, you can kind of see what the last budget amendment looked like, and this, actually the final budget for 1920, which was our first final budget, the first amendment line, and you can see those numbers as they roll up. And so for your consideration is amending the 1920 budget, with those additional expenditures and giving staff authority to move forward over the next 6 weeks to, once you do this, to allow us to go ahead and negotiate scope of works, enter into contracts, and move those projects forward. Madam Chair?
Thank you, Dr. DeFries. This is a good position for us to be in going forward. So council, either discussion or a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-06, amending the FY 1920 budget and identifying these funds for reallocation.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Good work.
Thank you. And just as a
Good
reminder,
work.
Madam Chair, do not run out after this meeting because we will need your signatures on the original budget amendments as passed.
And I have got to correct the record, take a moment of personal privilege and apology, and throw my government relations guy, John Booker, in the background while I'm at it. Sorry guys, Adam, welcome. I don't know why I thought you were Tommy from Senator Rubio's office, not Senator Scott's office. I know you guys, I do know you. Booker, I'll talk to you later. Thank you I apologize. Didn't want that to go on the record, not unclarified. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. DeFries, continue.
I think you gave him a raise, actually, there.
I did.
The last item on this list is the business plan reconciliation. Since this becomes a formal document, we will be amending the business plan according to your instruction in the last two motions, and we're requesting, that the business plan, authorization to go ahead and amend that, move forward with those contract negotiations, which I just discussed. And then when we get to the beginning, that October 1 date, you will see that business plan finalized online, so any citizen will know exactly what projects are underway, have descriptions, have maps, and understand exactly what you just did from the programmatic side as far as the budget discussion.
Any discussion, council? Questions? So we need a motion to direct staff to amend the FY 2019-20 business plan and authorize funding and contract negotiations of additional projects based on the RFP rankings, right? This is where we are doing?
And that's correct.
Okay, and staff recommended changes to FY 1920 budget detail.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, second. Any more comments, conversations? Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. It's going to be
You're
a
welcome.
busy year
Thank you.
coming up.
It is. Okay, we are now, Carolyn, I believe this is you?
Yes.
For council sunset review considerations.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you may recall, by way of background, last meeting, we discussed the sunset review provision in our interlocal agreement. I'll give a little bit of a background because some folks who are here today weren't a part of that discussion, and get you up to speed on what that is. When we originally formed the IRL Council, the original interlocal agreement that was adopted in February of 2015 contained a sunset review provision. And essentially that provision said that we would take a look at the organization in 5 years and determine whether or not it is effective and how to proceed at that point. Just for those of you who weren't a part of that process of transferring the National Estuary Program from St. John's into this organization that runs now 5 counties with elected officials at the county level and folks from the 2 districts in DEP, there was a lot of uncertainty at that time when we executed that interlocal agreement and went before your county commissions and went before your agencies. We didn't have any staff, didn't have an executive director, didn't even have a checkbook, quite frankly. We didn't have anything to really operate. And so, as you can imagine, there was some trepidation amongst those who executed this agreement. Is it going to actually work? And if it doesn't work, how do you create government and then reel it back in and get rid of it if it doesn't work? Because if anything, we want to make sure that there can still be a National Estuary Program, and perhaps if this was a complete failure, it goes back to the district, it goes to some other organization. And so that was really the thought at that time. And so here we are now, after having almost getting close to 5 years in February, because again, this 5-year period is measured not from our full 5-year fiscal year operation, but from when the interlocal agreement originally went into effect in February of 2015. So again, what this sunset review provision says is that in essentially February of 2020, which is coming up, that this board will do one of three things. You will pass a resolution to do one of three things. One will be to continue the agreement for another 5-year period. The other will be to amend the agreement, or the other will be to terminate the agreement. So we started that conversation last month because we want to make sure that you all, as you prepare to come to the IRL Council and vote on a resolution that would presumably continue, perhaps not, whatever the board chooses, but before you are in that position that you may want to go back and have those conversations in your own jurisdictions. So with that, there was a request that we draft a kind of a basic resolution that you could use to hand to your staff, if that's how you operate in your counties and or water management district, to have your individual boards essentially approve the action to go forward. And so I did that, and that is in the backup. And we just need to, I think, maybe kind of lay some groundwork as to when we expect that this board would indeed take action as defined in the interlocal agreement, which is pass a resolution at this board regarding the sunset review. Looking at our schedule, which is actually an item in your agenda later on, we have one more, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, one more meeting this year in November. And then it is proposed that we would have a meeting in February. That meeting in February would be, if the board approves that schedule later in the agenda, would be on or about 5 years as that interlocal agreement was called for. So that would essentially give you between now and that February board meeting here to go back, have those conversations in your own jurisdictions, determine what is necessary, and then it would also allow us, if there are any issues, perhaps in November, for us to have another standing item. If anybody needs to report anything that would be important to staff as we prepare for that actual action in February. So with that, Madam Chair, that's where we are with the sunset review. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. One final point I will note to kind of maybe put you back in the framework of where we were when we put this language in as an accommodation to some of the members that were concerned about government kind of run amok and what if no projects get done and we've got to rein it back in. We did put a provision at the very end that says should no action occur, meaning if this board were to do absolutely nothing come February, this agreement will continue for another 5-year period. So that was a recognition that we really didn't want to get bogged down in everything stopping if for some reason procedurally we didn't get to the point of actually passing a resolution. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So basically, our three options are take no action, and we just continue the way we are for another 5 years, right? Another 5-year continuance, amend the interlocal or terminate the interlocal. Comments, council? I don't think anybody wants to terminate, right?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to have the council request legal counsel draft a draft resolution in support of continuing the interlocal agreement for an additional 5-year period.
Second.
So we have a motion, we have a second, so basically we're going to continue as we have been. Okay. Any more discussion on that motion? Carolyn, I see you want to make a comment?
Just want to clarify. So this board essentially wants me to do the resolution that this board would be passing, so we would essentially be completing the sunset review now and no longer need to come back in February.
Correct.
That would be fine, and also be happy to carry back to our county. As some of you know, we were the last to come to the table, Indian River County, after a number of attempts. But we were finally successful, so I'd be happy with moving it the way I had read it, but still happy to
I can prepare a resolution, and I can, would you like me to bring that resolution back to you in November for actual execution, presentation and execution?
Well, let's get a vote on the original motion before we get ahead of ourselves here. So we have a motion on the floor, and we have a second to continue as we are. Any more discussion on the original motion? Any opposition to the motion? The motion carries unanimously. And can I just add as a comment, thank you, Commissioner, for those comments. You were the last, but they say the last shall be first. and you made the motion for continuance, the first one in. And I think that speaks to the collaboration and the success of this IRL Council NEP. So I think that's a very, very strong motion for the history of where, in our short history, I think it was said before, our very short history of 5 years of the future for this organization. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
It sounds like you saved 6 months in the process, potentially.
Yes. As a lawyer, I guess what I have to tell you is, when I look at the terms of the interlocal agreement, as a lawyer, I always get nervous when the agreement says on or about 5 years, which would be February, and not to look, when I express nervousness as to how folks might construe the interlocal, I don't mean to look at Indian River County but
Oh, that's fine. It was fun. 3 attempts to finally get our
Yes, sir.
our vote to pass.
I will have a resolution prepared for your review.
Very good. We'll have a resolution. Thank you so much. That was an easy lift in the 5 years. Thank you so much. Okay. Old business. Dr. DeFries on the Sub-Basin Task Force.
Yeah, Madam Chair, there was some discussion last meeting about whether we felt there was a need to actually create some additional committees on the RFP review process to specifically focus on sub-basin. We're always open to, make the process better, but we look pretty hard at the last 2 years of RFPs. And we feel that we've got good representation in our review committees. And so at this time, staff's recommending no change. However, we will pay specific attention in those RFP review processes to make sure that we've got good regional representation, of those individuals within those committees, so that no sub-basin, is left out or doesn't have representation on project review. And then should we need to specifically look at issues, we can always come back. And in fact, we can create a subcommittee in our advisory without, council, recommendation if we need to, look at something in detail. So right now we're recommending no change, and, we'll keep watching to make sure representation is regional. Excuse me.
Okay. Council discussion, commissioners, anything? Agreement? That's discussion. Thank you, Dr. DeFries. Now, discussion time that has come. I think it's very important, especially where we are moving forward, our executive director's compensation discussion. Carolyn, I'll let you take this, and we'll discuss at board after the presentation.
Thank you. Last month, the subject of the executive director's compensation was raised, and the board directed staff to do a salary survey and collect some information. There's information in your packet that was collected by the CFO, and he provided to me as well. Before we get into, I guess, the details that the CFO collected in terms of salaries, I guess I'd also go back and maybe give some background on the executive director and the status of his contract with the IRL Council. When we originally formed the organization in 2015, as I mentioned, the interlocal became effective in about February. We didn't have any money or any infrastructure, but one of our first tasks was trying to find an executive director. Many of you sat through those interviews, and Dwayne marched in the room, and that was the end of that conversation. We negotiated an agreement that had him officially begin on October 1st, although, as I recall, the moment he walked out the door, we already started essentially making you work. You were involved in reviewing documents and helping the organization as we neared that October 1, 2015 start of his employment agreement. That employment agreement was effective for 3 years, was set to expire in October of 2018. The initial starting salary for the contract term was $100,000. Then fast forward, his contract would have had expired, if not extended, on October 1 of 2018, but in late 2017, the board took up the subject of extending
extending his contract for another 3 years. In that conversation of extending his agreement, Dwayne said he did not want any change to his salary, so the agreement that was ultimately executed merely extended the term for an additional 3 years through 2021. So he has the same agreement in sum and substance as was originally executed in 2015, with the exception of we just extended the term so that he is still within the term of the agreement. In the interim, as you know, there have been multiple discussions at the board about his salary, and there have been a few times when the board has made direction, but not really taken a motion. In fact, when I went back and looked at the minutes and in my notes, when the board voted to extend his agreement for 3 years, they directed that in October of 18 we address his salary. But that never happened. So it kind of, here we are. In the process, as you know, you've directed staff to get this information. The information before you essentially shows 3 different surveys of salaries that the CFO collected. The first batch on your list is the COO's survey. So Dan actually reached out and obtained these numbers. And the numbers range essentially from 105 to 117 for the various positions you see there. And I have the specific numbers for each one if anybody has any questions. Additionally, apparently EPA at one point did a salary survey as well. Dan obtained that information from EPA. Those ranges are from 79 to 117. I don't have the breakdown of each one of those, but some of them Dan also separately obtained in the first column. And then the last section involves a third-party salary survey that was conducted apparently on behalf of, I believe it was Sarasota Bay NEP. And you can see there were a number of NEPs and other organizations that they collected, and those ranges were from 71 to 145,000. And that's the information before you. If there's any questions.
Does anyone know why midpoint's used instead of average?
I asked this, I wondered the same thing. I did not ask Dan. He just inserted that information. I'm not sure why the COO did that.
Okay, so council, here's where we're going to go here. We need to have this discussion. It's timely, and so Dr. DePriest's contract is extended to 2021.
Yes, ma'am.
So at a minimum, we need to put COLA in here, correct? Cost of living, at a minimum, included whatever we do. Let me just say, whatever we do, I'd like to see us at a cost of living. We haven't even done that. And I have to tell you, my concern is, I don't want to lose him.
Bingo.
And if any of you don't think he's not being recruited, with his skill sets of business acumen, being able to work collaboratively between science and business, it's a rare combination to have all of that we have here. I don't want to lose him. And I'll let you start, Chris.
Madam Chair, one part that Carolyn left out is Dwayne's modesty, in that when it was requested for his salary to be increased, he actually turned it to his staff and neglected to take his expected increase, or that which we would have approved. So as a leader, that shows me a lot about his integrity and his modesty and his ability to maintain a staff and handle them in that direction, in that type of atmosphere. So that to me shows his leadership, and so whatever we decide today, we should take that into account, that when we were struggling, we were having a difficult time keeping things moving from a funding standpoint, any monies that were available, he did not take and directed it to his staff. So that's a strong leader.
Yeah, I'll use myself as an example. When I was going to go on to another job from the Indian River Citrus League, I was thankful to have it, but I wanted to move on because I thought I had more worth. But our group said, "Oh, what's wrong?" And they polled not other citrus associations, but they polled who I did business with. and what they were compensated. At the time, I did a lot of business with St. John's, South Florida executive directors, and their salary was double and triple what I was making in 1985. And so that's what Dwayne's dealing with. He's not really doing a lot of business with people on that level that were polled. He's doing business with people that are far exceeding this salary level. I know it, I've been through it. And our group stepped up the plate and upped my salary, and I've been there now. This is my 40th year. So
40 more years, Dwayne.
I'm of the opinion that he deserves even more than what's here, and I don't want him to even put a bait out there in the water because everybody would take him. I want to keep Dwayne here as long as he's willing to stay here.
So, and I'll get down to this, and you're right, that conversation, Chris, when he went for staff and he didn't take a raise, we also on the table could consider a bonus. We can consider an increase, and we can also consider a bonus. That's within our purview. It's within our budget. We have the dollars, and I think it would have sent a pretty strong statement. It's just a comment. Commissioner?
Just a couple of thoughts and then a question as well. It's funny, when Admiral Justice and I were driving over here, one of the things that we were talking about is how important it is to take care of your employees.
Yes.
I can tell you, and it may sound negative at first, and then it sounds pretty good, I think, when you listen to the whole story. Just briefly, the folks that I have in my office, the highest paid employee in my office makes substantially more than the next highest paid employee in any of the other commissioners' offices. But we spend, when you look at it, overall, out of the entire office, we're either the lowest or the second lowest in terms of total expenditures out of any of the commission districts in my county. And the reason that, part of the reason of that is if the employees are treated well, they perform better, and better performing employees are oftentimes able to realize and find cost savings that otherwise might not be picked up upon. So I think it is important to do more than a cost of living adjustment. That said, I think a bonus, and I love Dr. DeFries. I think he's great. Hence the reason, as he mentioned, I'm going to be parading him around some of the municipalities in my area. But I'm hesitant to do a bonus when a straight increase is available for a couple of reasons. One of them would presume that he's looking for a job, and one would presume that he's not. Either way, it certainly favors going for a raise either way. If he's looking for a job, giving him a bonus is great for him because he takes it and walks away. But the converse of that, or the flip side of it, is if you give him an increase, he has all the more reason to stay. Plus, it's also not a one-year thing where he may not get it ever again, depending on the composition of this board. So I'd rather incentivize him to stay here by giving him a raise in an ongoing fashion than giving him a bonus. But I would ask just to have some idea in terms of what the cost of living adjustment, if we did that, I mean, what kind of numbers are we looking at in terms of the actual raw expense if we looked at what he was originally earning and then extrapolated out just for the purposes of discussion right now, just the cost of living to this point?
I haven't done those calculations, but we certainly can look and see what, various governments, and I know some of your entities have done over the course of the last several years. The state has typically issues a certain cost of living adjustment for their folks. Counties often don't follow that same percentage. Some counties do more, some counties do less. So you all would have to just determine what that percentage is.
What does the state typically use?
I don't know if you recall what
We haven't had one. We had, I won't.
It's usually taken off CPI, and last CPI in 2018 was 1.6. So I don't think
it
that's
doesn't follow the CPI. It's usually individually determined. I don't know if any of your counties have done particular, but they're all different, I guess, is to answer your question. We have not done the research to see what cost of living adjustments have been for every entity.
Well, we could just use the state COLA, just pick it's going to be relatively close.
The state has not issued an across-the-board COLA increase for all of its state employees, to the best of my knowledge, over the course of the last 6 years.
And
so I
we
would
will
be
find an
careful to
agency.
It's been sporadic. Sometimes
yes,
it's
has.
there, sometimes it's
They've
not.
done a lot of, I know like with South Florida Water Management District, my understanding is in lieu of a COLA, what they've done is gone in and picked certain
high-performing employees and taken a certain percentage of their budget and allocated it for increases for specific positions as opposed to an across-the-board increase. They've done that for a number of years. So it's hard to kind of just, I guess, as I sit here right now, give you a percentage.
I'll throw out a number because I've looked at the budget to see what it would support, and I'm flexible up or down. But just to throw out a number, I'd suggest we increase to 12.5%. And we can disregard the COI altogether, just increase the salary straight 12.5%.
Let's see if we have other discussion here. Commissioner?
Madam Chair?
Is that a motion?
Sure, I'll phrase it as a motion.
And I'll second that for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a seconded for discussion. Any more discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
One thing with Dwayne, you get somebody with multiple hats. Most of these other agencies, when you look in the background of who runs them, there's more people behind the executive director side. Dwayne has the really unique ability to be the technical side, the research side, the political side, the fundraising side. He wears a lot of different hats that most people are very good at one. He happens to be very good at a number of them. And, for that reason, I would be supportive of the motion that I've seconded.
So the motion is for 12.5% increase effective, we need an effective date.
Which
budget year, fiscal year.
Is there a cleanest effective date from a legal perspective?
We can make the effective date previously in time. The problem we have is there are, and since you didn't go the bonus route, I didn't have to jump in, there are restrictions on public entities giving bonuses on a retroactive basis. You can give them on a forward basis when you have a contract employee like we have, and so we would need to ferret that out. But if you want to make it retroactive, the answer is we certainly can
So
do it.
Is his contract run calendar year?
His contract is in effect through a fiscal year starting October 1st.
So October 1st, okay, is our budget year. So we can conceivably have everything effective October 1st. So then we have a clean hands policy.
You could have it effective today, you could have it, yeah. but yes.
Understood, understood. But for the sake of discussion, we could have everything start October 1st, including an increase, and should council decide they want to bonus, because then we don't have a backlog with a public entity, correct? Then we still have a clean hands policy. Sir?
Yeah, I've been involved with this since it was just a thought in Hans Tansler's brain and mine in a back room at the St. John's of the dream of having this created. And I'm very proud to sit here with what's going on. It's just a dream come true. And it really probably wouldn't have happened without Dwayne. I've seen from day one what he has done. I know what he's delivered in Tallahassee and in Washington. I know that the respect he brings, and if anybody ever deserved a bonus, in all the years I've been involved with all of my appointments and all the committees I've served on, Dwayne deserves a bonus. The lifting to create this for this lagoon has been phenomenal, and it's because of his integrity, his class, and his understanding of the lagoon that has done this. And I would like this council to entertain a bonus for this gentleman. He certainly deserves it.
So we have a motion on the floor. Chris, Commissioner?
From the bonus standpoint, what Commissioner Zork mentioned was Dwayne wears a lot of hats, including corporate interaction, fundraising side, interacting with foundations. Significant amounts of money have been contributed to the NEP, and I would suggest tying any bonus to the revenues that he may be able to bring in through the corporations and/or foundations at whatever percentage. I need to have the attorney provide insight on that, because anytime you tie it to fundraising side, there's probably some challenges in the legal realm, but it actually provides incentive as well for Dwayne to, even be more successful as he has with his corporate opportunities and his foundation interactions.
Can I suggest I don't want to go there? Okay. And I see Dwayne shaking his head because I don't want the thought that he's a salesman out there, and the more that I get, that's going to be my bonus, and that's where I'm going. I mean, and I understand what you're saying. In our world, I agree with you. In this world, I don't know that that's the position we want him to be in. And can I consider, for conversation, a bonus? He took nothing these last couple years. So a bonus, even though it's not retroactive, we are making up for the years that he did nothing, or he took no increase. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take a motion on the 12.5% effective October 1st and then come back to the bonus? Can we separate them out? Are you good with that?
Can I ask another question?
Yes, sir.
Just real briefly, I do want to be clear, and I think that's a great way to do it, to separate it. And I will, I'll agree as well that if anyone deserves a bonus, he deserves a bonus. I just have a personal qualm with respect to bonuses, largely for the reasons I've indicated. I still hope he gets it. I'm not going to support that. I will certainly support the 12.5%. But I'm happy to either do it, we can throw some Latin in there, nunc pro tunc, to a prior pay period, or alternatively, we can start it at the next pay period or October 1st. I'm flexible, but I just want to make sure for purposes of the minutes that we have some clarity as to the effective date. So if you want to make it effective October, I'm happy to do that. What's your preference, Madam Chair? I'm happy to.
Well, I think for record keeping for fiscal year, I would suggest starting at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay, and if the second still stands, that's how my motion will read.
Sir?
Is there an appropriate time to talk about an extension of time?
Extending the contract?
For, or longer term time?
We said another 40 years.
I don't know when that occurs.
Doug made that motion. Are you gonna second it?
Or how that would play in as far as, I understand there's just a year or two left on his.
Yeah, he's good. The contract term is through 2021. So council, what you can do, and it is very appropriate. So the motion on the floor is a 12.5% effective October 1st and extend the contract through
3 years from October 1.
Through when?
Do 3 years from October 1st.
So an additional 3 years, which would take it through
2024.
2024.
Is that all right, Dr. DeFries?
Number one, I've never been, so moved and also so embarrassed, and I do really, really appreciate your support. Yes, I appreciate the support. I think it's generous. I didn't ask for it. I will accept it this time. But I am going to make a statement about any consideration of bonus. Don't do it. And here's why. I am a public servant. I accepted the contract. I think this adjustment, is fair, if not generous. I, too, don't like the idea of bonuses in this public sector. If I was in the private sector, I'd be saying, come on, it's a different world. I don't want us ever to be viewed by the public as kind of, being administratively heavy. And so I've been very happy being able to be in front of you every time we do a budget and say, we're operating in that, gosh, at one point we were at 19%, but, below 25%. And so I deeply, deeply appreciate all of your comments. I appreciate the salary bump, but I'm going to respectfully request that you don't consider a bonus for a lot of reasons, but the perception is the most important. We operate at a level that I think is high, and I don't think that perception is one that I'm comfortable with when I'm out there, talking to everybody in these 5 communities. So I'm very happy with where you are, and I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Sounds like an acceptance of another 40 years.
Well, actually, after this last year, if you could give me 40 for sure, forget about the money, I'll take the 40.
Okay, council, so here's what we have. We have the motion, as I understand it, is a 12.5% increase effective October 1 to line up with our fiscal year and to extend that contract through 2024.
Presuming the second stands, that's still my motion.
Is that true with the second? We're good. We're good with that. So let's vote. Yes, Doug.
Since he won't take the bonus, can we possibly create a scenario where it be retroactive today?
Yes.
I'm happy to modify the motion accordingly.
Yes. So if we can't bonus the bonus,
Let's start early.
we start. See, I've got to. Okay, my securities license. So if you can't, my mind is going a different direction. Pull it back to this way. So if we can't make it right. We can't retroactive the bonus, but we can do the increase retroactive, which bonus is the bonus, but we call it
instant pay raise.
Yeah, an instant pay raise. So with that,
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
I apologize, I don't know the contract agreement. Is there, if I understood correctly, there's not a cost of living annual increase built into it? Okay.
but I think we'll take care of that with what we're doing now. We can also add that if you so choose, but we would have to, we can bring that back to decide the entity of which we want to follow with that, because we certainly don't have clear guidance with that. However, council, we can make this retroactive to, what's today, August 2019? We can go back to what, 16, 17? Being facetious. Kind of not.
Scared me on that one.
Yeah, good morning.
You could do to the end of the prior quarter, trying to work in a quarterly budgeting style, which would be June 30th, or you could go further back.
Why don't we make it effective January 1st of this year? That would be an increase of how much? That would be a salary bump and not a bonus. It's a bump. It's not a bonus.
With me many years.
I love the calculator coming out.
Yeah, I deeply appreciate this discussion. I'm thinking about how we budget, how we've been focused on, being lean. I'm thinking cash flow right now, and I am totally comfortable with effective October 1 for the next, fiscal year, because we're going to have to bring an amended budget back to you anyway in November. But I want to make sure that, our financials are healthy. We did not anticipate that in our financial planning. I think we're fine, at that first of the fiscal year. I get nervous when we do it retroactively. And just from a standpoint of straight conservative fiscal management, I would not, my recommendation as your executive director, as much as, I'm sitting here thinking about the numbers, is, start at October 1.
When you
keep
see
it
a
simple.
surfing trip, I can see that longboard. You're like, this trip is being planned while you talk.
If we do that, at least let me buy you lunch or something. Is that fair?
You have a deal.
Okay.
Okay, so here's where we are. You're uncomfortable, Dr. DeFries, this is about you. And our appreciation, obviously, and professional respect, and for the continuation of the, we're laughing, but of the IRL NEP. We know that under your guidance, no matter who sits up here, because we will change, the constant has been you. Several of us have been here when we first started and had the good fortune to vote you in as our executive director, and it's been an honor these 5 years. But we're going to change out, folks, and stability is the key for any organization, and you are the anchor for the NEP. So Council, from what I'm hearing, we go ahead with the 12.5% effective October 1st. Are you good with that, Dr. DeFries?
Yes, I am. I think it's generous, and I deeply appreciate your collective and individual vote of confidence.
Okay, so unless something changes, we'll go ahead and stick with the original motion of a 12.5% increase effective October 1st and increasing his contract for 40 years. 3 years?
40? 40 is good by me.
To 2024.
With many options.
With options, always with options. We always have, whenever we vote, we have options. Right. So we have a motion, we have a second, we have clear, solid discussion. Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing none. Congratulations, Dr. DeFries. Thank you for the heavy lift.
Thank you.
So, and I heard Commissioner Lober say he was buying lunch to celebrate.
Just for this gentleman. You know, that's what he says, he's too quick with this whole round.
We don't discriminate like up here, so you're the first. Thank you for paving the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work, Council. That's good. New business, RFQ scores and funding recommendations. Kathy, this is yours. We authorized this at the last IRL council meeting to address 2 current contracts required, the harmful algal bloom monitoring and a new priority to continue the IRL species inventory and focus on biodiversity through a service contract. Kathy, first one up.
Yes, so we did issue 3 RFQs. We had 2 respondents for the microalgae and HAB contract. 1 respondent who is already doing this work for the atmospheric deposition, and the Smithsonian was the sole respondent for the species inventory. So we're going to ask you for separate motions, again, sort of like how we did the RFPs. The first one would be the recommendation to approve the rank list, and the second one approves us negotiating and entering into contracts with them. So here are the rankings. You'll see for the harmful algal bloom, we had 2 respondents. The University of Florida wanted to do just the 5 sites in the northern lagoon, and FAU Harbor Branch wants to do 5 sites in the southern lagoon. You'll see their qualifications came back that everybody was really highly ranked and super highly qualified, so we're very happy with the responses we got. Under atmospheric deposition, the respondent was Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. This is to continue the atmospheric deposition monitoring station that we have out at Sebastian. This is the only one that's in operation in the region. So we're very interested in having that continue. And then Smithsonian was the sole respondent for the biological diversity expansion. And they've had the species inventory from about 25, 30 years. So we're happy that they would win this contract. And again, very highly qualified.
Okay, so Council, I'm going to read the motions that are requested here, and if we can get through these, unless there's any discussion or concern about, because we have directed staff to go forward with this on the RFQ. So the first requested motion is to accept the management conference recommendation and approve the final ranking RFQ listing on the microalgae and HABs.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. The second motion is to accept the management conference recommendation to fund the top-ranked qualifications contingent and consistent with budget authority and authorized staff to negotiate and enter into a contract with the applicant, again, on the microalgae and HABs.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. These 2 motions will reference the atmospheric deposition, and the first requested action is a motion to accept the management conference recommendations and approve the final ranked RFQ listing.
Move approval.
Motion by Chris, seconded by? Thank you. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. A motion to accept the management conference recommendation to fund the top-ranked qualification. Again, this was for atmospheric deposition, contingent and consistent with budget authority, and authorize staff to negotiate and enter into a contract with the applicant.
Move approval.
Motion?
Second.
Second. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. This third requested actions references species biodiversity. Motion to accept the management conference recommendations and approve the final ranked RFQ listing.
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
And a second. Any opposition to the motions? Motions carries unanimously. Motion to accept the management conference recommendation to fund the top-ranked qualifications contingent consistent with budget authority and authorize staff to negotiate and enter into a contract with the applicant.
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Second. Opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. New business, Dr. DeFree, strategic revenue planning. We just did some expense planning we did, okay.
Madam Chair, the last meeting, there was some discussion about, and it was connected to the interlocal agreement, and, should you, as individual partners, want to bring money to the table. And, we wanted to separate that discussion because really the policy on the sunset it's not about money. And so I've actually talked to each of you, and my recommendation has been and will continue to be, if you've got additional dollars locally for Indian River Lagoon, those local dollars are actually best spent for your projects. So you're leveraging those additional local dollars with outside matching dollars, including your projects that come before us for funding. And so I don't know that we need any additional discussion unless the board would like that, other than we're changing where we are with the CCMP adoption. And so I do see my role shifting as your executive director into that revenue side of things. And we're going to talk a little bit about some opportunities. But there are revenues outside of the public sector. There are grants, there are foundations. We have not had the staff or the time to, kind of pursue an active and strategic, effort to try to start, finding additional dollars out there. And so I see that as a substantive change in some of my time as we move forward, because there is money out there, and there's money in places that, most people don't look. But it is time consuming, and so if you should choose, and Kathy, is there a slide on this one? If you should choose to bring, money into the NEP, you don't need to do that, by changing the interlocal. Our interlocal policy has provisions. It basically says any gifts, grants, assistance funds, or bequests from any source can be brought forth to you as council. So rather than, you looking at this as an opportunity to amend that interlocal, my recommendation is, if you have local dollars, let's put them into projects for match. But if you know of local dollars, other entities that may want to contribute, by all means, call me, and we will go have those conversations about increasing our revenues. Because you as council, and in fact our very first external grant was from Port Canaveral, and it was not a small commitment. Port Canaveral was one of the first players to come to our innovator and investor network with a check for $100,000, which has actually created the corpus of where we're headed with our communication scheme. And so you can accept those dollars, and we should be working more between me and you all in seeking some of those additional funds. So unless there's any other discussion, I think we're in a good place. But staff's recommendation is don't try to amend the interlocal to address the financials.
Thank you, Dr. DeFries. And that's, I don't know about you, council, but if we don't have to amend this interlocal agreement and then come to a complete agreement amongst ourselves yet again, I think we're all better served. So I agree with you, Dr. DeFries. We'll continue to work on other options as a council going forward.
Great. The next item is related to this, but when we had that last discussion, knowing that we're in sunset, but one of the things that we are headed towards, it's hard to believe, Cesar, that we're coming into, one more year and we'll be in a 5-year program evaluation again with EPA. And so I asked Kathy and Dan to work on a document that we revised since actually you may have seen it. And this is one of a few documents I want to share with you. We wanted to look at the federal contribution and the interlocal. And we put together a document. And I just wanted to share the highlights of this quickly. But I think Kathy did an amazing job to make this clear. And we had some feedback from our management conference, especially the financial subcommittee. They said, the interlocal contributions are really not return on investment. It's an investment in the lagoon. So we've, changed the language a bit since you may have seen that first draft. So on the left side, that table, you will see, the federal funding over the 1990 to 2015 timeframe. And remember, back then it was money in, grants, money out. It was mainly, there was match in all of that, but we wanted to show where that federal contribution was going county by county. And actually what surprised me when we, started to dig deep was the number of projects we've historically funded. And then in the middle, the pie chart is your contributions under the interlocal. And on the right-hand side, the table is how we look to date, 2016 to 2020. And there were some concerns voiced to me from some of our partners this last funding round that, gosh, there weren't many, in fact, there weren't any local projects from our southern counties that were funded in that last cycle. So Martin County, St. Lucie, weren't in that funding cycle. And that always worries me. I've always watched, for kind of that equity. Even though we're one lagoon, we've all said we wanted to look at the whole lagoon. And so I think this is a really instructive piece of information. And this includes the 2019-20, that if you look across the board, we've expended about $8.3 million. I wish it was billion. $1 million. If you look at the distribution of dollars, they're actually quite even. And you'll notice down in Martin County, they're equivalent to, Brevard's almost. And in fact, you look at the number of projects. So a lot of times funding isn't the number of projects, it's the cost of project. So I wanted to use this for 2 reasons. Number one, we will continue to encourage our 5 counties, but we need our 38 cities actually beginning to bring proposals, good proposals to us. And again, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I also want to showcase that, as we rank skin in the game, those communities that have match, are going to gain a little market share with our current, review process because we're giving extra points to those who are bringing match. And so we are here to help our cities and our counties to move that forward. Next round, it could go the other direction. But at this point, it's a pretty fair distribution of both funds and projects. And gosh, it's amazing. 4 years, we've got 114 projects either underway or completed. And so we need to start communicating that activity out. Kathy will talk to that at the very end. But what's going to come up next, I was talking to Commissioner Lober about the cities. What's the city distribution? We had a call from one of our NGO partners, and they said, gosh, you guys have forgotten our match. We didn't forget about it, but looking at match dollars, especially over 30 years, you have to go into the actual proposal to see cash match versus in-kind. We're going to do that. And so over the course of the next, several meetings, we're going to be bringing a couple of these deeper dives about, what are you doing? What do they look like? What are the projects? Because this is our legacy right here is the projects. And you all have wanted that. Shovel-ready, turn dirt. And so it really does showcase the power of this federal partnership. And we'll send a couple of these up with you. Just to remind our friends up in Washington, D.C. that, more federal dollars mean more local match. But one and don't hold me to this number yet, but I had Dan take a quick look at match just since our history started. And in our first year, we were about a 1-to-1, and match is going up. His preliminary estimate over this last year is that the local match to our dollars is actually starting to move into that 7-to-1 range, which is a testament to all the work you do at the local level to bring local dollars into those projects. So we'll keep this moving forward. If you have any suggestions, yes, it's still a draft, but it's out there, and we're just trying to identify productivity. And I think this is the beginning of a number of these that you'll see. So no action needed on this other than wanted to explain, what we gave you.
Kathy, is this up on our website? Not yet, but it will be relatively soon? Yes. Okay, thanks. Wonderful. Thank you.
So that's all we have for that item, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. DeFries. And
we're at 11C.
Yeah. Our RFP process.
So now we get to look at next year already, but not next year, but the year after. So the 2021, we're proposing to get our RFP requests to our communities earlier this year. We'll give all of us a little bit more time to look at those reviews. And so first slide is kind of where we've been over the last 3 years, and staff's not recommending any changes. I think you as council were very wise to kind of look at our revenue streams and expenditures in these bundles. So the local cost share and the specialty tags go straight to shovel-ready turn dirt. And up until this upcoming year, 100% of our salaries and administration were coming out of that local cost share. That has been a powerful, powerful place, especially for my salary, because it allows me not to be burdened by federal obligations and regulations when I'm up in Tallahassee or in Washington. But the EPA dollars we use for CCMP implementation, and this next year coming up, if you remember, our new special projects coordinator, that salary will be coming out of the EPA bundle with the exception of a portion of benefits. So if you are all comfortable with staying in that larger distributional arena, then what we're recommending is the following. That we're going to continue the RFP focus, because really nothing's changed in the lagoon that would take us off that focus. And that focus has been on really water quality and critical habitat restoration. And during one of our meetings, I think it was a management board, somebody said, well, it looks like the amount of commitment for projects is going down. And really what they were seeing were just the RFP. So I wanted to just, for the record, let you know that these recurring service contracts, like the harmful algal bloom, some of the planning documents that we're working on now that may have a year or two, once they're completed, that money's going to come back to that external RFP process in some cases. But it shows that we are maturing from just being a grants organization to having a corpus of work that we are in command and control of as a fully functional national estuary program. And we haven't done this arbitrarily. Our goal is by the end of next year, so end of 1920, when I do that performance evaluation, that we are going to be at the excellent category on all of the review areas that EPA reviews us on, and we are on track. So here's our recommendation for that 2021 RFP process. And those dollars are just general guidance for our proposers so they know that they shouldn't give us a $9 million proposal, if we've only got about $500,000 available. It's just fair that they know about how much money you all can, with your discretion, move those categories around depending on the quality of projects. So we separated water quality restoration from habitat, mainly on the discussions we had our last meeting and also discussions within management conference. This idea that we wanted to start to get a little bit more rigorous in basically return on investment, the cost benefit. Water quality, pretty easy, although it's not, but it's pretty easy compared to trying to do cost benefit on an oyster reef. You know, is it just acreage? Is it just linear shoreline? And so we're going to be looking at the criteria to make sure that we have, you know, done that as best as we can with the available science. So we're separating those so you won't have to review and we won't have to review a septic to sewer project against an oyster reef project. We think that's going to clean up our review process. Community-based restoration. There's a lot of interest in education. We're still feeling that request that we need to be, doing education. And because of your commitment to restoration and active projects that impact water quality, that community-based restoration is any project that's using volunteers where most of the project dollars are kind of in the delivery of the program, whether it's shuck and share programs, living shorelines, you know, and again, we separated that from restoration, so a utility stormwater project, you know, wouldn't be ranked equivalent, you know, to, you know, let's say Brevard Zoo, you know, shuck and share. Just, they're two different entities, two different outcomes and deliveries. The fourth recommendation is not new, but it's going back to 2 years ago. But we just simply didn't have the money last year. We'd like to put $100,000 back into science and innovative pilot projects. Bob Yulovich mentioned that there was a lot of discussion about social science. Our recommendation as staff is, you know, if the social scientists want to come into the science category and compete, you know, we'll keep it broad, but we want to really look at science that is applied to the CCMP implementation. You know, and innovative projects, I'm really pleased. DEP, I think it's $25 million in the budget this year for innovation pilot projects. You know, those dollars can go a long way if you can find one of those rare transformational moments. And so I think our money is well spent there. We'll see where those project proposals come. It's not a lot of money, but some of the early R&D may very well become, you know, the next project that comes to DEP for a pilot. And then lastly, we're continuing to commit to small grants. And so the request is to basically authorize staff, you know, to develop and issue those RFPs, you know, on or before the November, early December timeframe, unless you want to direct us in a different direction than where we are right now. So, Madam Chair, that's it.
Thank you, Dr. DeFries. So this is the motion on the floor to authorize the staff, as Dr. DeFries stated, to develop and issue the FY 2021 RFP announcement in November, December 2019 timeframe pursuant to our IRL Council Board direction. Is that the direction that you would like to go or change or amend? So we'll entertain a motion or discussion.
So move.
Move approval and seconded?
Second.
Second. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
And what staff pledges is that we're going to do a much more aggressive job, even though we put this out pretty aggressively. You know, I do think we may need to reach to our city partners, some of our smaller communities that may not be tracking what we're doing. So we'll make a proactive effort to try to reach deeper and into our community so that they know this RFP is out there. The next item, Madam Chair, if you're ready, is an important one. Each year, you have given me direction on how you want me to proceed with both state legislative and federal legislative priorities. We rolled all of these, very similar to last year, through all three review committees. And so before you, you know, in the black, you see very similar language to either what we had last year or some staff amendments. Everything in red is a recommended change to that original staff position. I want to start with the state of Florida. And we may need some DEP guidance on this one, and also South Florida, to make sure when we start thinking about state, you know, are we on target or are we missing something, at least, you know, from the agency perspective? Number one, in the past we've said continue annual funding for the NEP. Thanks to DEP, I think we mentioned it last year, we are now in their recurring budget, but you know, there was some suggestion that it doesn't hurt to ask, and so we're not saying how much or whether that will happen, but expanding support. You know, we don't know what legislative bills will be filed, but you know, just go ahead and let everybody know we want to continue funding. And so I think the best way to do this is the way we did it last year. Let's do it line by line, you know, and we'll just amend. Kathy can amend as we go, and then we'll kind of entertain a motion, you know, on just the state position. By the way, we have kept this very, very broad. There was a lot of discussion about diving into the weeds on specific issues that we know are coming before, you know, the legislature. At this early stage, I think it's best to be broad. I learned a long time ago, you never tell an elected official anywhere, you know, how much or where they should be taking the money. You know, and I saw that a lot in Tallahassee. You know, they come up with a number, you know, and where the state legislature should be finding the dollars, and those requests don't go very far. So they are broad for a reason. So are you comfortable with that, number one? Or do we want to remain just continue annual funding?
I want to triple it.
Well, the question, continue and expand the annual funding for the IRL-NEP for the state of Florida. One thing we know, water quality is the issue du jour. It is. So never has there been more friendly time legislatively than to fund quality water projects. So to not ask for more would absolutely, in my opinion, be irresponsible at this time, especially from this group that represents the National Estuary Program, the only one in the state of Florida. So
Actually, we have 3 other NEPs in Florida. They're just not 40% of the East Coast.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, but do we?
No objections?
No objection with an increase. We don't have to put the dollar amount on.
No.
Right? Okay.
And in fact, you will see on the federal side, you know, where we had dollars last year, I've taken them off. The only change to and we have had a long-standing commitment to, and I don't think we should, you know, minimize this second bullet at all. This is really where we really want to see the state go, is in local cost share funding. We've seen some, you know, good improvements. There were some bills that were significant that simply didn't make committee or didn't get out of committee. The only change on this one, there was a discussion about muck, that it's not always about just dredging muck. There's some really innovative ways, sand capping, and so we added remediate and kept removed, so we've got some broad application there. And so these have been the areas of emphasis for both nutrient and pollutant reduction. And we have always, and we've talked about this, you know, we have always kind of suggested to the legislature that, you know, broad appropriations, you know, giving DEP or one of the other agencies authority for competitive grants programs. It works great with the water management districts, works great with DEP, that, you know, those dollars really, you know, should be competitive, you know, for the appropriate purpose.
So I agree, and I think this council agrees from what I've heard, that we want to give you take a broad approach. It's early on, and give you authority. Let's give Dr. DeFries, continue to give him the authority as executive director to represent our best interest of the IRL Council and our partner organizations. And I would encourage us as a council, and I know we do this, but to continue this dialogue, to have our lobbyists and all of our organizations and intergovernmental staff stay in close communication with Dr. DeFries, because if he's representing our interests here at the state or the federal level, we want him to know what's important to us. So let's make sure we communicate with that. And I got to say a personal shout out to our good friend Congressman Michael Waltz for his amendment to South Florida Clean Coastal Waters Act that includes the entire Indian River Lagoon. This is the first time this has been included in a federal act. Hopefully we can get the congressman here at the beginning of the next meeting. He's in Israel right now. Hopefully we can recognize him at the meeting in November. But we're making great inroads, great relationships, and great collaboration. And thanks to you, Dr. DeFries, for helping assist us in getting all of this done.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just one suggestion / question. On the first hyphen there, which is upgrade wastewater treatment systems, in the spirit of broadening it, maybe it's worth including the word upgrade and or update. Because I don't know if they consider a technology change an update or an upgrade, and if they're going to allocate funding, I'd rather have it allocated in the broadest possible sense.
Great suggestion.
Thank you.
Got that, Kathy?
I'm sorry, where is it?
The upgrade or update.
First bullet.
First bullet, internal.
It's a good comment.
Madam Chair.
Anything else, Chris?
The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council had a summit on biosolids, and a lot of the conversation is, you'll see down here, it says create, strengthen, nutrient pollution, et cetera, reduction. As part of that, I think we as a political body can help support FDEP as an organization by securing funding for FDEP to be able to find innovative ways to deal with biosolids, that which would not be spreading on farmlands or discharging effluent into canals. I'm going to update you with what I have going on in St. Lucie County. But we know that the crap's never going to stop. No other way to put it. But the bottom line is we got to find an alternative to managing biosolids. So there was a presentation at that summit talking about alternative innovation technology to deal with biosolids from waste to energy, and then also to be able to better clean the product. So I don't know how, it kind of all fits together, because all of this is contamination that we're trying to remove from the system. But as importantly, rather than removing it, if we just stop letting it in the first place, and I'll share with you at the end under comments about what we're trying to accomplish, and it'll make more sense then. But, not approving land spreading of biosolids near water discharge locations, that even which directly empty into the lagoon, that just does not make sense. Why spend $20 million to remove contaminants when you can just say no to the front end? So I don't know how that gets fit in here, or how you can bring those together. But it is a bigger picture. I mean, we're trying to take contaminants, pollution, enteric bacteria out of the system, and that's got to be a part of the conversation. It's a non-cost factor. I know we're talking about monies, we're talking about allocations, but regulatory side, just simply not letting matter in is the cheapest way of doing what we're trying to accomplish. So I don't know how that fits into what you're trying to accomplish with this legislative request, but
I think it fits in perfectly. We do have a biosolids resolution from council. We work closely with DEP. I can tell you there's going to be probably more than one biosolids bill, filed. I know the rule is being worked on. So what I can do is make sure as we move, this is going to happen fast. Committees are already bills have dropped already. Committees are, getting ready to start the 1st of September. We'll do updates in November, but what is it? Second week of January is when session starts. And so this session is going to go fast. And so what I do so this is not something we send to legislators. When I go to Tallahassee, I carry it around. It's a leave behind, and we have a conversation. And so I try to express your collective and sometimes even individual concerns as I move forward on those one-to-one conversations. And I also agree. Some of the technology out there is, it's going to be, it'll have to be where we go. There is no other way to handle, we've got, what, 821 to 1,000 people a day coming into Florida. We've got to figure out how to manage biosolids, but we'll take that as we move forward. And then in November, if we need to tweak this, or if there's specific issues, by all means. One last thing, and the chair mentioned it, each of you in the counties, when you're doing your walkarounds up there, I am available. I don't lobby, but I can provide technical and support information, with you when you are doing your county days and your walkarounds. Some counties have taken advantage of that. I know I've walked the hallways with St. John's River Water Management District staff. I constantly run into DEP in the hallways, but I'm up there not to lobby. I almost never say good bill, bad bill. In fact, I never say that. What I do say is this bill has these scientific or water quality implications.
We'll do that. You do what you do, Dwayne. We got the other one.
So are we okay there?
You were good.
Okay, the next one is federal, and there's a couple high points on this one, and you'll see some changes. We have removed any mention of that. Remember, we were kind of talking about $1 million base. We've been at 600,000 for a while. We are authorized at 750 under the authorization of 2016. There is a chance that we may see that 750 materialize in the next budgetary cycle.
Wow.
But there's always that opportunity somebody could do more. And so I want to just alert you, and I wanted to make sure it was okay for me to talk about this. A bill has been filed in the House already. Our reauthorization, Cesar, is 2021, right? And so this is a little early to see a reauthorization bill starting, but a bill was filed by Representative Malinowski out of New Jersey, Democrat, co-signed by Representative Fletcher, Texas Democrat, co-signed by Republican out of Louisiana, Garrett Graves. That bill, if you should see it, do not panic. It doesn't have our name in it because it's an amendment. We were in the original 320 language. So this is just adding those additional estuaries into that language. So don't panic like we're getting left off. But the highlight of this is really the authorization of appropriation. And so this is amending by striking $26,500,000 for each of fiscal years 2017 through 2021 and inserting $50 million for each of fiscal years 2022 to 2026. So almost a doubling. Now, whether that's going to hold and whether it's going to last when it gets over to the Senate, it's early. But that's why we do not want to be specifying dollars. Everything else on the federal side is similar except for those, really the second to last bullet. There's some language tweaking. So my question to DEP in South Florida on bullet number 4 is, are we still in that $200 million position with Congress? Last year we were specifically asking Congress to appropriate $200 million for Everglades restoration and SERP. Has that number changed at all in the governor's position or the DEP position that we're aware of?
I'm not sure, but we can find out.
Yeah, find out for me, because, if in fact we've upped that ask, we'll get it to where it is. I think the expanding harmful algal bloom, we should be at that every year, because, there's a lot of need there. But the next to last item, has come up mainly because of lots of concerns about groundwater contamination, both in military facilities, but also private industrial facilities. PFOA, PFOS is the hot button in Brevard County right now at some of our bases. The Kennedy Space Center has a fair amount of, legacy load. And so this is just to expand and expedite funding for groundwater remediation, especially where it's a human health threat. We know that there's a lot of need on a national level. It's something that Cesar works with, a lot. And, those remediations are limited by the amount of money Congress funds for them. And so, again, pretty general. I may be back to you in November with a little different, but I want you to at least give me my marching orders. So any concerns with this list? I mean, Cesar, do you see anything that would be objectionable?
One, on the brownfields, you know, the term brownfields has a specific regulatory meaning, and groundwater contamination and cleaning up not necessarily has to be related to a brownfield side. So I'll be careful in just saying that you want more money for the brownfields, because that's just a specific regulatory
It's a
program.
limited sector.
Yeah, so versus groundwater contamination, which could be taken care not only by the brownfield program, but also by the Superfund side.
And Dr. DeFries, I would add to that that the reference to emerging contaminants of concern, that's a statewide issue that DEP, it's important to DEP, and we're evaluating on a statewide level. You mentioned Brevard, but many counties across the state, DEP is putting forth that effort for sampling and monitoring along with Department of Health. So.
Any recommendation for language on this, or just a heads up?
You just mentioned Brevard specifically, and I just wanted to point out that that's a state. It's important statewide across the state for DEP to look at these emerging contaminants of concern.
Yeah, thank you. And that's an issue we're hearing with the biosolids as well, that secondary pollutant stream. Would you recommend possibly adding pollutants of emerging concern after pollutants, so sites where pollutants or pollutants of emerging concern?
I think pollutants covers it. I just referenced, you mentioned PFOA, PFOS, where there's specific lack of regulatory authority on them now, but it's getting there. So those unregulated contaminants are also of interest.
Great. Well, tomorrow morning, we'll start the game on the legislative side again, and I'll keep you posted individually, and we'll give updates at all subsequent meetings as we move forward. And that's all I have for this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. DeFries. Yeah, I don't think we have probably used your expertise as well as we can when we're in Tallahassee. Maybe we'll, at least I'm speaking for Volusia County, we will try to increase that. Thank you so much. Okay, new business. Meeting calendar 2020, including end-of-year project showcase at the November meeting and the addition of a lagoon town hall meetings in each county during 2020. Great idea. Kathy, thank you so much.
Thank you. So I have our draft meeting calendar for next year. Yeah. It's not as nice and clean as the one from the previous year because we had some conflicts with using this room. So our thought is that all of our council meetings will be held here permanently to take advantage of the great AV and TV capabilities that are relatively cost effective. Well, they're inexpensive. They're not cost effective. They're just inexpensive. But to get you out into the community and to get more exposure for our program in your communities, we were proposing a town hall meeting in each of the 5 counties. And we could do this, one, if there's need for more than one, we're happy to do that. But we're envisioning these as sort of evening meetings where people could come and participate, maybe have a panel discussion with whoever the elected person is leading that. And then we would talk about the lagoon, and it could be sort of a public forum where people could ask questions, and we could talk about success of projects and things that are going on. So that's sort of the town hall aspect of it. In terms of the meetings for the management conference, so we're going to keep our management board and STEM meeting on Tuesdays prior to your meeting. Those meetings will be continuing at Up the Creek Farms in Grand Valcaria. We are going to do a Thursday CAC meeting here in this room, and then your meetings would continue on Fridays. And the calendar gets thrown off a little bit in May for the CAC. There is a National Day of Prayer, so we can't have it in this room. We're going to just move that meeting ahead of the other ones. And then in July, we have early voting in this room. And so we're moving that whole suite of meetings will be earlier than it normally would be. So instead of in August, it'll be the last week in July. And then one other thing for you, we are envisioning, we had talked a little bit, and thank you, Commissioner, for having Mike up here earlier. We're thinking about the November meeting being sort of a project success showcase. So we'd like to bring in a whole bunch of mics to talk about NEP-funded projects and what they've done and what their successes have been. So with your approval, we'll schedule those, and that would be sort of our end-of-the-year celebratory meeting.
I think that's a great idea.
Love to hear your thoughts on that.
In talking with Dr. DeFries and others about this, I think what this does is it takes our council out of this and into our communities and will help showcase how positive is this, and that the partnerships, what we're doing in our local communities, and anytime we can highlight this great work, it helps all of us in our communities with the funding and the projects and the support. I think it's a win-win for everybody. More work for staff, but thank you.
That's okay, because we realize we need that connection within your own community, so we're happy to do that.
Madam Chair. As part of that, each of us have our very professional staffs, very capable, and as part of the presentation to us, we should give them a heads up, to put their own presentation together, whether it's drone footage, pictures, et cetera. So you can tell the story, like we told the story earlier today, but it didn't really grasp you enough to see what has been transformed. And so giving the different elements that may come in who were projects successful, giving them a heads up to say, take a lot of pictures, be prepared to do a presentation that actually shares the experience, because when you're hearing it, that's one thing, but when you're seeing it, it'll also drive interest in your local communities to say, I want to participate as a volunteer. I want to, well, why didn't we do that in our county? Because they did it in some other county. And then it drives the question too. Also, the success of the half-cent sales tax. You guys are amazing. God bless you. That was fabulous. But others may have those same initiatives. We were able to pass our sales tax, but not clearly as financially rich as others. But we're making headway. But that's the conversation. Sure. Where do these dollars go to, and why are they successful? Because that helps to tell the story as well for the elected officials and the agencies that exist here. So. Yep,
absolutely. And just so all of you know, we are requiring all of our grantees to submit high-resolution photos for every project that gets funded from now on. So we'll have a body of data to draw on.
Very good.
Great. And make sure when you do those that you have the video, like take the show on the road with the video that was presented, the One Lagoon.
Yes.
That's excellent. And I think
thank you. And many of you all haven't seen that yet. We haven't dropped it officially yet, but we will be giving you that heads up shortly.
Good, okay.
Having the funders' logos in whatever the presentation would be helpful as well, just so that we give thanks.
Yes. So thank you for referencing that. When is that video going to go live?
We are not sure. So the plan is, we were talking with our communications folks about this, to drop it among all of the partners. So we've got over 100 folks in our management conference. We're going to share it with all of you, everybody on the management board, all of our NGO partners, just basically everybody, and ask them to embargo it and drop it all on the same day, so it gets a lot of play.
It's not going to be embargoed. You put that out. I promise you it's going to be a click and share. It's on social media.
We're already getting that pressure, but we're holding on to it for right now. So, but soon, it'll be soon. But we want to drop it all on the same day to have that punch. And
be great.
Yeah, it's really good. I think you're going to be very pleased with it.
And if I might jump in, the day that I would like, if this all works appropriately, would be when we sign the CCMP at the signing ceremony. And we'll keep you all posted on how the dates of that all comes together, because that will be a VIP event.
Chocolate and champagne.
I think we should have done a tease commercial for the public right now, and this is coming soon.
Yeah, that's right. To be continued, huh? Wonderful, Kathy.
Great trailer.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this?
I like the good point.
Is everybody good with the calendar? Okay, town hall meetings. Do we need need a motion to approve our draft meeting calendar and continue holding regular scheduled Board of Director meetings here at Sebastian, and our county-specific Lagoon Town Hall meetings and end-of-year project showcase at our November meeting.
So moved.
Motion, seconded by?
Second.
Second. Any opposition to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we are time for IRL Council member reports. We will start down there with you, Chris. Excuse me.
Next one is Executive Director. And I'll be brief.
Well, that would be, I'm sorry, Dr. DeFreeze. We want to give you a bonus and a pay raise, but I'll let you talk. Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
I just really have two items that I want to bring to your attention. Number one, in your package, as a result of the Management Board recommendation, from here on out, you're going to have 3 additional financials. We know that those kind of audited financials aren't that useful to any of us, really, but we've always done that because it's fiduciarily responsible. So in your package, you will see a list of all projects, both completed and active projects, and then an active project detail. So we're going to start to give you every meeting a list of the active projects and the quarterly expenditures to date. So you can kind of, hopefully you'll start seeing that completed list is going to get bigger, the active list hopefully getting smaller. And then we are going to do the same with the budget. So in each meeting, you will get more of a cash flow budget rather than just the financial accounting. We think that way you can kind of see quarterly how our expenditures are going based on budget, and that's really what you want to see. The actual accounting financials we have are rolled up so far. It doesn't really give you useful information. And then one last just announcement. We are working closely with DEP, the Division of Water Restoration Assistance. On Thursday, August 22nd, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., right here in Sebastian City Hall, we will have a workshop. Actually, FDEP will be having a workshop. We're just assisting, with the site, and support on the state revolving fund. And so this will be a full workshop, so we're encouraging every municipality, even if you don't think you're going to bond, understanding the financial value of the state revolving fund is really important. It's cheap money. Basically, the interest rates are structured. I've been told it's like a 30%, giveaway when you look at time-money equation on those. And a lot of utilities, especially larger, more sophisticated utilities, use it all the time for capital improvements. But many smaller communities, are reluctant because of, the worry about debt. But this is a particularly powerful financial instrument, for looking at a suite of projects. And it's not just wastewater. There's a lot of opportunities there. And Aaron, I don't know if you want to say anything to that, but we're excited that we're having it here on the lagoon and happy to be hosting DEP for that.
And tremendous plug. Thank you for that. And likewise, encourage municipalities to take advantage of that. It's a powerful opportunity that they can help their communities and the region.
It seems like from what I saw in there, it's like the water act for wastewater, drinking water, now it's a non-point source, which is for stormwater projects. And I think the guidelines are set by DEP as far as how the money is going to be used, but like it's very cheap money. From one side, and sometimes depending on the guidelines and the structures, it may even be non-forgiving. So we encourage a lot of people to go through that program if they can, and the state manages here in Florida.
So what's the day and time again?
It's going to be Thursday, August 22nd, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. right here in City Hall. And to that same kind of vein, I have instructed we have our grant writers, and I'm taking a little executive privilege. We've asked one of our grant writers to begin to put together a revenue source list that we can share with our partners, whether it's local, private, we're going to build basically where do you find the money list, because we're asked constantly about, we don't know where to go, or we hear there's no money out there for projects, which is actually wrong. There's a lot of money, but you got to know where to look. So somewhere in the next couple of months, we'll be bringing, a support document for our stakeholders and friends, that showcases, where do you find these dollars? Who do you talk to? What are the restrictions within some programs? Because it's rare to see anybody, for example, look at HUD, on some of these utility improvements. But there's money opportunities, as you well know, within, Department of Ag. There's just a lot of money out there, and we need to get the word out about where it is to our local constituents. So we'll keep you posted as that information comes together. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. DeFries. Okay, now we will go to the end and council member comments. Commissioner?
Okay, we have new members of the council here today, so you may not have heard this before, but it's something that I bring up frequently and have been for 3 years. The biosolid issue is a very important one for all of us. I have an applicant in the county, doesn't matter who it is, it's just that it is, that wants a direct discharge permit into the C-25 canal with 80,000 pounds of biosoliid and compost material with the stormwater runoff. We've been fighting with this, and we've provided many opportunities to deal with the biosolids, including creating an ordinance on how to actually do a commercial composting facility. They're not unusual around the country. We wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity and an option available. However, we are now involved in a lawsuit. Some of the regulatory agencies that are here have been notified of that or are familiar with it, so I don't need to point anybody out. But I'd like to also thank the interveners, some of which sit on this council, and those who may not be here today. The interveners are right to say that this is a problem in our communities, and let's manage it the proper way. I talked about it earlier. We can spend tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to remove contaminants, but it doesn't cost us anything to keep it out. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish here. It can be properly managed, but that's a fight we have, and it's happening actually all over the nation. I have a really serious situation. I do have some agencies in the audience that may be helpful to us, and I do have a staff member that may have more information if I run them under a bus again. But we recently had a blatant discharge of 8,000 gallons of oil from an auto salvage yard into our preserve. That preserve is actually located at the head of a stormwater canal, which leads to the lagoon. So we will probably be coming for Superfund and or brownfield money to try and clean this up. We have personnel on site now trying to minimize that which will be the plume and some of those challenges that are there. Going forward, again, these are all regulatory issues. We have a former Cargill fertilizer site off of Selvets Road in the middle of St. Lucie County, which is directly associated and connected to the 10 Mile Creek, which discharges into the North Fork. That has been a FDEP site, and it has been monitored for many years. There's an applicant in the city of Fort Pierce who has asked to actually create another auto salvage facility, which would add to the already degraded land that is there. So we're trying to get as many people to understand this from a regulatory side so that we can continue to manage that issue. I'll call it a problem, because if we let these types of scenarios exist next to these water bodies, we'll continue to have these contaminants that will continue to, in our case, dump on Martin County. And I've been trying to save Martin County from us and St. Lucie County. We have a move to the septic to sewer. We know that septic to sewer is an issue. We're making it a policy concern, and as part of that, we probably have 40,000 septics along the 10 Mile Creek. So being able to find the revenue source to contribute to or match these homes and these elements to sewer will help us to break down the hurdles for people to invest in their own homes, removing fecal matter and septic discharges into the waterways. That being said, St. Lucie County, through a nonprofit called the Solar Energy Loan Fund, which we created, started in 2010. It was official in 2013. Not only does it provide funding for solar, for energy efficiencies for homes, they also have moved into the hardening of homes, and they also are a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, which reduces the cost of the funding up front. 75% of the funding that they provide is to low and moderate income groups and entities, which is very helpful for those who may not be able to afford, a commercial loan at, 12, 15%. And they also do oversight of the loans, making sure that the individuals can pay it back. They have a high level of return. Less than 1% of their loans actually fail, so they have a good return on that process. And most recently, and this is a request from former Commissioner Doug Cowart, who's the executive director there now, is moving into funding source for septic to sewer. So he has made me aware that his entity, Solar Energy Loan Fund, would be available to assist any community along the lagoon in trying to find additional funding, whether it be a match or whether it be FDP, whether it be state agencies in some form. And they would like to be able to have a body, a person, to actually administer that. He would need funding to do that, but I'll let you guys talk about that, or let Mr. Coward and Dwayne talk about that for future grants if there's an opportunity there. They have also just reached a milestone, over $10 million in funding in the last 7 years. Unfortunately, I talked about the 10 Mile Creek, and I talked about the likelihood of 30 to 40,000 septic tanks that are co-located along the 10 Mile Creek. We have a health advisory in St. Lucie County. The health department has indicated enteric bacteria and has a health warning to stay out of the water in that section, in that area. So we do know that septic to sewer is a viable issue. The biggest part of that is the funding side. How do we break down the hurdle to get people to participate? We know, too, that if you go from septic to sewer, there's also a value from an appraisal standpoint. And if you have water and sewer, it's even more, so you get the value on the backside. And lastly, we have a water program. Our utility has done a pilot program in Lakewood Park to begin to move potable water into the community, so they don't have the situation where their wells are being affected by that which is septic there. So the future is real for them to actually move to septic to sewer. And then lastly, again, through NEP partnership funding, we are moving in the last phase of Paradise Park, $1.78 million. It's an $18 million project for 10 years now, and we will be moving thousands and thousands of pounds of contaminants from the canals are on either side of those communities. So we're moving that forward, and I just wanted to, again, it's the partnerships, it's the putting all these funds together that help us be successful. And that, Madam Chair, is my report.
Thank you. Thank you for your continued service and work and keeping us up to date on these important issues. Let us know how we can help. Yes.
Well, we were talking about funding and funding opportunities, and I just wanted to bring this to you all's attention. You probably already know this, but I sent the email to the executive director, the governor, and the legislature appropriated $40 million statewide for water supply and water reuse conservation. The period to apply for that was open July the 31st and closes on August 16th. So we have a week from today to apply for that funding. But I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that opportunity. And then if you want to share that with the board members, that would be great. There's information on there about who to contact within the district for information about how to apply. And then also, yesterday, the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District met, and they voted to significantly expand water quality monitoring in the Northern Everglades watersheds and the Lake O Basin to provide data to support statewide water quality efforts. Specifically, within the St. Lucie Basin, they've added 15 new monitoring stations throughout the area, the Northern Everglades. They increased the number from 161 monitoring sites to 243 monitoring sites. They increased the frequency of monitoring and collection from once a month to twice a month. They added the addition of nitrogen as one of the things that they would be sampling at these monitoring sites, water temperature and dissolved oxygen. So we see this as a really positive step to providing more data and making science-based decisions about water quality.
Libby, may I ask a question?
Sure.
You said you added nitrogen. What about the phosphorus? Is that part of the thing?
That was traditionally sampled.
Okay.
That was, but this nitrogen is a new nutrient that they're including.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just one comment on the aquarium up at the port. One thought would be, if you're going to look at aquariums, I grew up with a father whose best friend started the Miami Aquarium, and we traveled to other aquariums because of that friendship. Dr. Henry Truby started the aquarium back in the early 50s. And I, as a little boy, traveled with my father and got to be a little old, but I went to a lot of aquariums. But the one I saw that was, in my humble opinion, that was the best of the best was the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I just think that's just a rock star, and if you're ever going to use something as a template, just a thought. A comment on septic tanks. One thing I found out at the Blue-Green Algae Task Force meeting at Harbor Branch is that in the entire United States, 15% of all septic tanks are in this sandbar we call Florida, up in the entire United States. And so if you don't think septics are a problem, they are, because this is just a sandbar. It's very fragile, and anybody who flushes using that technology, you're part of the problem. That hit me pretty hard. I had no idea that we had that many and that we were responsible for that much a percentage of the United States septic tank systems. Lastly, I brought this up to Dwayne, and just to Dwayne, this is just an open request to you, is just to look at possibly merging the St. Lucie River Initiative. I brought it up last month, or not last meeting. The St. Lucie River Initiative, as you all know, is from the South Florida Water Management District. Kathy LaMartina has run it for 20 years or so, has done an extraordinary job putting that together with the funding from then Senator Ken Pruitt. It's running out of funding because of the success of us and other important things happening in South Florida. I just didn't know if there was an opportunity to merge with us and or bring it as a basin sub-area for us and other sub-basins for Volusia, Brevard, Indian River. It would be a template to be a sub-basin of what we're doing to bring more input in, because that group, in my humble opinion, did a tremendous job allocating out that money for the Stewart and Fort Pierce areas for 20 yeast. So just a thought.
Madam Chair, I actually have talked to Kathy this week about that. She was going to go back, talk to DEP, kind of see where they are on the St. Lucie Rivers issues team, and then we'll continue a dialogue. Okay. We actually serve on that committee, and there's not much money, and so we need to see where that's going. And one other point to that is I have been asked to serve on the aquarium task force, and so I will be sitting as a technical advisor to that aquarium restoration center plan that's moving forward.
Wonderful. Good.
That's right.
Just want to echo some of Chris's comments as well. And Martin County was able to procure a state resiliency planning grant, which we're extremely proud of, that will help us complete an in-depth vulnerability analysis and develop a response plan. And the county, our board has committed to putting some of our funds as well to match some of those resiliency funds. As far as septic to sewer, our board has committed to removing 10,000 septic tanks over the next 10 years and allocated a significant amount of funding and prioritized that as one of our legislative priorities, as well as a priority of the board. And that certainly showed in our recent budget adoption. And I want to thank some of the folks at DEP and their water restoration, because I have had a complete indoctrination of emerging contaminants of concern in the most recent week and a half. And without some of the resources you have and the guidance, I don't know how we would have sort of navigated through that. And Chris, I'm going to ask you for the acronym for SELF.
Solar Energy Loan Fund.
Solar Energy Loan Fund, and we have also embarked on looking at that as well as adopting that as part of our septic to sewer program. And then to Doug's point earlier, I'm a third or fourth generation Martin County native, and I will say that this year, bringing my family to the sandbar, it has been like we've not seen in many years. So just being able to experience, like you said, the water was almost the caliber of the Bahamas. So it's been a terrific summer, and we're hoping to continue on that.
Thank you. We're really excited about, in case you missed it, Governor DeSantis appointed a Chief Resilience Officer. This will help the statewide response through multiple agencies and multiple communities and stakeholders to prepare for the environmental and physical and economic impacts of sea level rise. So it's really great as far as the foresight and the investment into that, and we're really happy to have a Chief Resilience Officer. Also, you've heard the Red Tide Task Force was also announced and appointed by Governor DeSantis, and Dr. Chuck Jacoby and Dwayne DeFries are on that as well. I'm leaving out 9 other folks. There's 11 folks on there, and that's great. And then also, as you heard, the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, the 3rd meeting happened. Secretary Noah Ballenstein kicked that off. I welcomed everyone, and I want to encourage everyone to be involved in that. Listen, it's very informative. You learn something. I think it's very helpful to the community and residents as we look at blue-green algae and the cause and effects. There's a lot of good information in that task force, and that's a tremendous resource for everyone. And then finally, we're also very happy with our environmental crimes unit that has been moved from FWC to the department, and they're doing a lot of great work. And so we encourage everyone to tap into those resources with the department as well if there's any criminal activity going on regarding pollution or discharges.
I'll call you.
I heard it.
He's on it.
Thank you. And echoing some of the comments on biosolids, that's something we really, if you can keep it out, that's the cheapest way to accomplish that. Locally, not far from here, the county participated in the Sebastian sewer project. That's now, the connections are starting to make their way onto the system. And hopefully within the next month, our West Wabasso Phase 2 will be completed and we can start connections in that area. But I'd like to highlight, in this past budget, Representative Altman had put in $800,000 in for a flushing study. I know it's very popular, and they looked at, the district did a study about 2 years ago when they looked around the port area that did not seem to be necessarily feasible or practical in that location. Representative Altman had specifically put, when you look at where the funds are to be used, it says Brevard / and Indian River. For 9 years, I've been kind of plugging the idea of a flushing connection at the Bethel Creek area. And so we have, the county commission has done a letter of support, City of Vero Beach, Town of Indian River Shores, and I'll be back in these chambers next week also looking for a letter of support. And it's kind of twofold. When you look at the hydrology of the lagoon, if they did do a project in the northern Brevard, which created a higher head of pressure of water at the inlet, it would reduce the small amount of flow that we have in our central county area, because if you have more water competing to get out of the inlet that's coming in from a northern source, we need to be at the table even more so than if we are a selected site, or maybe they need to look at two to balance it out, one North County, one South County. Bethel Creek has been an area that had opened and closed many times in the 1800s and early 1900s. There was actually a permit filed with the Army Corps in 1914 to make it a permanent inlet. Obviously, this is a mechanical connection modeled after the Destin Harbor project, which I'll be touring in about the next 3 to 4 weeks up in the Panhandle. I think it's part of the solution. You have to look at the legacy load when you're starting to move water into an area. What are you going to be stirring up and moving? But it's glad to see that there's kind of that step one money, and we're just asking that Bethel Creek be a site of consideration when you're looking at this big picture. But I know complications of doing it at the port are very complicated, and that's probably an area to stay away from, just to not interfere with that great economic engine there at the port. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to dovetail on a couple things that were mentioned, and I'll double echo on the biosolids here. On the 20th of this month, on my county commission agenda, I have a biosolids discussion item where I'm hoping that we're either going to be able to limit or ban the application of biosolids, at least in certain portions of the county that are close to waterways. Anyone that has any interest in coming and chiming in, certainly I would be more than happy to have anyone, especially since I think we're all on the same side of the equation, at least in this room. If you want to reach out, I'll give you all the info you need. I'll show you where the good restaurants are over there. Make sure that you get a good tour of NASA if that's what you want.
Is that when you buy lunch at that meeting?
If you come out to speak, I would be inclined to buy lunch at that point if you come to board. I should probably have a person or some kind of a cap associated with that, so I don't have 600 people show up. But so that's the first. That's again on the 20th. I believe it's a morning meeting, so it may be a little less convenient for folks. But if it's something that anyone has any interest in, or if you have any good material on biosolids, I may already have some of it, but by all means send it to me anyway. I certainly would appreciate that. In terms of other items, just one other big item that I do want to mention, and it's, I guess it's kind of a fun item that Dr. DeFries has been helping me with, and also Virginia Barker from my Natural Resources Department. I don't know how many folks dive here by a show of hands. Anyone? Okay, we got 1, 2, 3. Okay, we got a few. Good. All right, so DEMA is the Diving Equipment and Marketing Association. It's basically the industry group that meets, I believe they alternate between Orlando and Vegas. But they reached out to me based on some items that we were doing in Brevard with respect to the lagoon and restoration, and asked if I would speak for 45 minutes at DEMA this year, which is someone who's a recreational diver and had at least half a dozen dives in the past month or two. I think it's really cool. So aside from being able to go into something that's generally industry only, I think it's great. I mean, they have folks from all over the world, quite literally. I mean, you have folks from Micronesia and Australia, you have all the manufacturers, a bunch of the bigger resorts. So it's going to be an opportunity for us to essentially lay out the situation so far as the lagoon is concerned in a way that we can tie it to an industry that could stand to benefit from having that restored. So I'm looking forward to that coming up later on this year. If anyone has any cool photos or videos, preferably short videos if they're videos that you think I might be able to use to incorporate with that, please send them my way or Dr. DeFries' way or Virginia's way, and we'll certainly get them put together. But lastly, I just want to thank again Admiral Justice for coming out. Certainly good to have nice partners in Brevard County and elsewhere throughout the state that are a pleasure to work with.
Thank you so much. You might want to check out Volusia County. We have our reefs are pretty amazing. We've sunk a couple big ships. We're actually on the front page of the new Dive magazine, and I'm not a diver, but when we make the front page of the magazine, that's a pretty big deal. Yeah. Our reefs are amazing.
I may have to do that.
County. It is. I'd be happy to get you that connection.
Yeah, please. I actually have a new video and camera rig, so it's a good excuse to test it out.
I will get that for you.
Oh, Madam Chair, I have to bring up our latest new reef just last month. the Volsea Bernadette. She's in 102 feet of water to the keel. Her deck is at 78 feet, and the crow's nest is at 68 feet. And the clarity of water has been superb. And so we're also doing a test on lionfish attraction. He has a name for it. Anyway, but it has been beautiful, and so come on down. We'll make room for you.
I don't need much of an excuse, believe me.
Well, thank you. I just have one thing. You've all touched on a lot of things here, but I have to share with you, we had a check presentation ceremony down in Oak Hill. You're going to hear more about this. This is one of our big success projects in septic to sewer conversion. They qualified for their first $100,000 from the Indian River Lagoon grant, and then Volusia County another $100,000, the Gabordi Canal, which is part of our reasonable assurance plan. So we thought we'll do a check presentation, just really rally the city of Oak Hill and all the stakeholders to thank them for it. And Goodrich is down there in Oak Hill's closed on Monday. They opened up for us, so we thought if we get 30 people, we'll be doing well. Then it came, and it was invitation only. Then it came up to 50. Then we're up at 74. And when you get a call from your Congressman Walsh that was just appointed and said, hey, Deb, can I come to your event? Well, yes, please come. So we had mayors, we had electeds. Dr. DeFries, thank you for coming. Kathy Dr. Jacoby was there. The stakeholders, and what was and Senator Tom Wright was there, presented a check for $250,000 to the city of Oak Hill. The energy that was in that room was tangible for this little city that's been working with 4 or 5 years on these projects, for everything to come together at once. It's coming together. Our moments are building momentum, and you're going to see great turnaround and more requests for grants down there, but it was phenomenal. It exceeded all of our expectations. It really was. It was a great event. So thank you all for that, for voting for that little grant that they got down there. $100,000 made a really big difference down there. And that's all I have. We will see you in November. Anything else, council, before we close the meeting? Nope. Dwayne, anybody? We're adjourned.
Nice to see you.